Surprise! I think I'm dead on time, actually. Let me just refresh the stream and see if I am live. Hello everyone, welcome back to Tomlinson Talks. Yes, I am streaming on a Saturday, per the previous poll. I did enjoy streaming on Monday, by the way, so it may be the better day to do, depending on viewing figures and chat engagement. But I hope you're all having a very nice Saturday night. My wife is currently out doing Christmassy things. She is building wreaths for the front door with her Catholic book club. So she's doing all sorts of wholesome Hobbit activities, while I am embroiled in yet another controversy on the internet. Today ending in Y, I suppose. Let me know how you're preparing for Christmas, ladies and gentlemen. And also, if you do have questions, I will address super chats if they're relevant as they go through the show, or if they're not relevant, just because you have a burning question that you want to get to me or you want to insult me or something. We'll do that at the end of the show, and it's probably my favourite part of the show. Perhaps we'll institute a skip to the front of the line if you disagree with something rule. Always used to do well on college campus debates, didn't it? We all grew up on SJW cringe destroyed compilations, but things have moved on pretty drastically since the internet blood sports days. Hello everyone. Yeah, I can see you all in chat. Good evening. So, ladies and gentlemen, do you feel represented by the following clip? This was during the announcement that Shabana Mahmood made about supposedly ending the small boats, but instead rolling out new safe and legal routes for foreign criminals to get charter flights directly into Britain. Because, of course, her primary concern is the safety of said foreign criminals boarding the boats from Calais and sinking to the bottom of the channel if they do something as stupid as, pull out a switchblade to stab one of their fellow foreign criminals, which has happened more than once, by the way. Accidentally piercing the boat and going down to the bottom where, they've chucked away all their passports and their SIM cards. So she's very concerned about the safety of men from the Horn of Africa and the speed at which and cost that they can access our country. So she decided to announce these Potemkin asylum restrictions, but her incontinent opposition, like the Green Party, and then her fellow kin from the subcontinent, regardless of their party, basically freaked out. And this was the most egregious exchange that I caught live. This was Ashbana Begum, who is the MP for Poplar Limehouse, where my still living grandfather was born. He was born basically on the same road as the Olympic Stadium. He was delivered by the nuns that have been fictionalized in the BBC series Call the Midwife. It was a homogenous Cockney area, and now they have been ethnically cleansed out to the seaside towns like of Clacton that elected Nigel Farage, or to Essex, or to random areas on the outskirts of London where I am. And the other MP is Iqbal Mohammed, who is one of the independent Muslim MPs from one of these ethnic enclaves. If I'm remembering correctly, he's the MP for Batley and Dewsbury, which is where the Batley Grammar School teacher was sent into hiding by a Muslim mob for showing a cartoon of their prophet Muhammad in a religious education lesson about censorship. So, all of this context is to say, in the following exchange, can you spot where the interests of the native British people are represented? I will give you a gold star and a chalk ice if you can manage to do so, because I sure as hell cannot.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Deporting families after they've resettled here because their country is deemed safe is simply wrong. Could the Home Secretary tell us how the government determines what a safe country is, and will she publish the criteria? And given that she mentioned the DRC earlier, is she really saying it is a safe country over there? And will she also publish all existing returns agreements so that members of this House and indeed the British public can properly scrutinise them? I have done the reading and it's not in the detail.
Home Secretary.
Well, we already do safe country reviews, so we would seek to continue that. They are publicly available in terms of our position on different countries, and in fact mostly pass through secondary legislation in this House. I make no apology for a system that will privilege in the future those who come to this country through a safe and legal route rather than those who pay people smugglers thousands of pounds and end up in the north of France instead. And the point on visa sanctions is related to the fact that many countries do not comply with us when we seek to return people lawfully to their own countries. And this is just one of the tools that we have at our disposal to have compliance with those countries so that they do take their own people back.
Iqbal Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Given the UK's historical and ongoing involvement in unlawful military interventions alongside allies such as the United States and Israel, how does the Home Secretary assess the correlation between these foreign policy actions and wars and the displacement of populations resulting in increased numbers of refugees and asylum seekers arriving in the UK? And what steps will her government make toward proactive peace-building initiatives and the restoration of overseas humanitarian aid, which could address the root causes of displacement and reduce the long-term pressures on our asylum system?
Home Secretary.
Well, the government always plays its full part in peace processes wherever we can. We put our shoulder to the wheel on the delicate and diplomatic efforts that are required to bring conflicts to an end. But that is not actually what is relevant for what we're discussing today. We have a broken system today. We have thousands of people stuck in the system today. And we have thousands of people coming on boats through the north of France through reasons that are nothing to do with the British government. But we still fulfil our international obligations, and we will do so going forward as well. But I make no apology for wanting to move to a system where we incentivise safe and legal routes instead.
Thank you, Madam.
I am this woman. Whoever she is, I don't share any of her politics, but that is how I feel existentially, because I'm sorry that I've made you all just watch 2.5 minutes of a Pakistani, an Indian, and, I don't know, a character from the Forest Moon of Endor? I think she's actually from Bangladesh. All argue over the most expedient and generous fashion by which not just more foreign aid can be given to their various partitioned sections of the Indian subcontinent, but also how they can quickly export their co-ethnics and their kin and their countrymen to our country in the most convenient fashion. At what point was any of our interests represented here? Not at all. And so it was this particular clip that enraged me enough to discuss this on a recent GB News interview. Now, you may not have seen this interview, as many people haven't, because GB News, God love them, did a very silly thing. I'll drop it in the chat so you can all see it, and I'll probably link it after the stream is done in the description. But GB News did a very silly thing where they had a backlog of about 5 interviews and they released them all on the same day. And not to disparage them, because I do actually like appearing on GB News Digital with my good friend Stephen Edgington. But if you are going to have 5 long-form interviews and they're all on current affairs, maybe don't release them all at once and have YouTube penalise them in the algorithm. Because like Victor Davis Hansen was also released on the same day as me, and he got barely any views when he usually gets hundreds of thousands. So this wasn't just a me thing. But anyway, if you get time, go and add it to your, what's it called? Watch later, show it some support, try and give it a bit of algorithmic life. And I usually wouldn't ask this, but I'm currently trying to, well, they're trying to, not just get me cancelled from GB News, but get GB News an Ofcom strike because of this. Because I brought that exchange up. That previous exchange in Parliament between Shabana Mahmood, Ashbana Begum and Iqbal Mohammed in that interview. And I said, this is proof that we shouldn't have anyone from the Indian subcontinent in Parliament. We should not have anyone without any native British ancestry at all serving as MPs. Now, this caused a freak out. And I thought it was worth responding to here. Because, I mean, I'm not really engaging with their arguments in any good faith because they aren't showing me any good faith, because they don't actually make arguments. They just, you know, call you a racist and a bigot and demand you be blacklisted and deplatformed for complaining about this state of affairs. But I'm going to engage with all of the discourse around this and the attempted cancellation of Lucy White as well, who made this point around the same time, because they never make the affirmative case for why we should be ruled by foreigners. You know, that thing that Aristotle observed thousands of years ago as being within the playbook of tyrants to keep the company of foreigners who are deracinated and have no connection to traditions or investment in an intergenerational cycle of stable governments. They keep them as their confidants rather than their citizens, because foreigners usually won't try to usurp them for the throne of their own lands. Turns out now, instead, if you just allow foreigners to have positions of power in your government and local councils and the civil service, especially if you astroturf them there with favourable safe seats for your party, with DEI shortlists, with DEI policies and equalities legislation throughout the impartial civil service, it turns out you get ruled by foreigners after all. And I don't think this has worked out very well for us. But turns out the internet's been losing its collective mind at me for the last 24 hours or so, and at Lucy. So I thought we'd discuss it here. And then I thought we'd go on to, after that, discussing how we get the representation we actually want. Representation, by the way, for those of you who don't have a working definition, because we hear about it constantly, yet we're never afforded it. So Hannah Pitkin has a book called The Concept of Representation. This was covered on Lotus Eaters, actually, I believe in a book club by Carl and Bo a few years ago, while I was still there. Yes, Lotus Eaters mentioned. You can get your sort of finger up in the chat. So she defined representation as, and I quote, "Representation taken generally means the making present in some sense of something which is nevertheless not present literally or in fact. What matters is being made present, being heard. That is representation." So, what you value being made present is representation. So, what does Parliament value in that clip? Not any of us. What Parliament values is bringing in as many people from India, people from Africa, people from the Middle East as possible. Oh, and by the way, again, I have such Israel-Palestine fatigue. The entire conflict, bored by it. Even if Israel were to stop shelling Gaza tomorrow, they would still bitch and moan about having our borders open to the entire Indian subcontinent, to the Middle East, to Africa. Like, sorry, is Israel bombing Pakistan right now? No, it's just an Islamic slum, and you want to escape it to turn our country into an Islamic slum, but to take as much money from us as you can while you do it, because you have some, like, dear bandy ethnic grudge against the British Empire and white people. Okay, glad we're settling that score. Thank you very much. Point being, British people aren't made present here. So are the British people being valued in our politics. And in order for us to have the possession of our own country again, in order for us to feel valued, in order for us to settle the fractured pre-political we, the question of identity, out of which you form a civic polity to redress your grievances, we need the ability to collectively organise, and we also need the ability to prevent this occupation of our parliament again. And this is why we just shouldn't have anyone without any at all ethnic British ancestry in our parliament. I've seen the argument be that we should do the American presidency model, where if you're not born in Britain, you shouldn't be able to be an MP. And that might be a solution. However, I still think that the civic nationalist, administrative citizenship model, which says as long as they're born in Britain, they're going to have loyalties to Britain. Well, it turns out that Shabana Mahmood, born in Britain, Kemi Badenoch, nominally born in Britain, James Cleverly, born in Britain, with an English mother, and yet none of these people actually have loyalty to the country and the people therein. So just being born here is not enough. And also, being born overseas while having the ancestry of a place, if it counts for, Pakistanis born in Britain having more loyalty to Pakistan, then it can count in the inverse with Brits born overseas who are still distinguishably British, one of the native British ancestries of these isles, and if they returned to their ancestral lands, they would be able to govern it, just as, Jews born overseas, if they return via the right of return policy to Israel, they would be able to govern Israel, just as when it came time to decolonize the British Empire, there was no confusion as to who was being kicked out of Africa, or India, or Pakistan, right? They knew exactly who we were then. Suddenly we've got this modern confusion about who an Englishman is, because Shabana Mahmood says she's English. No, well, when your ancestors were turfing out every white face they saw out of the subcontinent, I don't think they thought, oh, wait a minute, could this be a Pakistani? Is Rudyard Kipling India's greatest poet? Is Jared Taylor Japan's biggest export? No. No, there's no confusion here. So we just shouldn't have any of these people in our parliament. And if this comes at the expense of a good MP, because I am quite soft-hearted. I mean, I'm quite a conciliatory chap, despite the number of enemies I tend to make. If this were to mean, for example, that this excludes an exception to the rule, so let's think of one. Suella Braverman. Suella Braverman is a very nice woman. I've met her on a couple of occasions. She sat down and had a conversation with me at length, just about politics, when she didn't need to give up her time. She joked with me about the fact that I had been expelled from the Conservative Party on the same day that we met. She tried to do the right thing while in government, and she understands what the problem is, and she has no qualms about laying blame at the feet of the likes of Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson. If this were to mean that Suella Braverman could not be an MP, I'm sorry, but if one child can use the roundabout responsibly, but if you've got to look after a class of 30, and the other 29 are spinning on the roundabout so much that they're making themselves violently sick, then I'm sorry, no kids get to use the roundabout anymore. And you can say to that kid, look, I apologize, you know, you're a net asset. I understand you're not like the rest of the kids, but we do have to have the common good in mind here, and we just have to get to where we need to go. So, and I think, and Suella hasn't been asked about this, so I don't want to speak on her behalf, but I would presume that if you offered her the choice of, you have Shabana Mahmood as Home Secretary, Iqbal Mohammed heckling her about the inability to import Syrians and Afghans and Palestinians, and Asparna Begum saying that Poplar and Limehouse is not enough of an ethnic colony, she'd like to expand it. And if Suella could press a magic button and have all these people excluded from Parliament tomorrow, but it means that even though the country would be run better, she wouldn't be able to be an MP anymore, I think she'd probably press that button. We have reason to believe, because later on, someone in a similar position also says that they would press that button. But also, what inspired this stream was not just the pile on me for what I said, and we'll get to that in a moment, but was Prime Minister's questions. So Prime Minister's questions, for anyone who puts themselves through the torture of watching it, is a protracted exercise in Kemi Badenoch only talking about taxes and parochial Westminster gossip, as if we're not being rapidly demographically replaced, that people aren't being raped and murdered every day by people who don't deserve to be here, that children aren't about to be sterilised in their hundreds again by the NHS, by the return of puberty blockers. No, instead, we're going to talk about Angela Rayner's council house. So, utterly exhausting. And then, when it cuts back and forth to the other MPs that are allowed to ask questions, Ed Davey gets up and says we need to rejoin the EU, and Nigel Farage is Putin's puppet again, like he's auditioning for Adam Schiff's job over in America. We get the SNP yet again screeching also about Brexit, and I don't know what else, I need subtitles to understand them. Then we might get a reform question, and, you know, Richard Tice has been practicing it in the mirror for 3 days, and it still isn't very charismatic. Then we get Plaid Cymru yelling in Welsh before they do anything. And then, what we normally get is one of the Muslim MPs from whatever party, after the various Labour MPs have got up and said, does the Prime Minister agree with me that we've just given the voters a bag of unicorn farts and rainbows, and aren't we such wonderful people about it? Basically filleting Keir Starmer as he stands at the dispatch box, though I think he might reject those advances from the female MPs. Anyway, what we normally get is a Muslim independent MP who stands up and says something. And this one, this week, where is it? This one. This was Shokat Adam. Good British name. He's one of the independent Muslim MPs. And he's sporting a prayer bump on his forehead. Now, if you don't know what that is, that's when your skin gets so calloused from kneeling down 5 times a day in the direction of Mecca that you rub it against the rug. So, he gets up, I think this was the last question for PMQs, and demands why Keir Starmer has not adopted the all-party parliamentary group definition of Islamophobia, which the Labour Party had adopted when Angela Rayner was Deputy Prime Minister, or was she head of the Labour Party, under Jeremy Corbyn, and when Wes Streeting had helped co-author it and wrote in The Guardian that Islamophobia is a kind of racism, and he's now, you know, the health secretary. So why has Keir Starmer, in the midst of trying to define a non-statutory definition of Islamophobia, and we know, as Keir Starmer's a lawyer, it doesn't matter whether it's non-statutory, because actually the guidance runs the judiciary and the ideology runs the judiciary more than the law these days. But don't worry, we're going to abolish jury trials soon, so that's going to be all of the law. Brilliant. He got up and demanded why Starmer isn't producing this definition anymore, why he has abandoned it. And again, I'm going to torture you with these clips, because what is being made present here? Who is being made present? Who's concerned? Who is valued? Is it us? No. And so they are making the case in real time, or as I put in the caption, banning foreigners in Parliament. It's never been stronger.
Shocker Adam. Speaker, no religion, no theology, no philosophy is beyond critique or scrutiny, and we must protect freedom of speech at all costs. But Islamophobia is real, at least for Zainab Hussein in my city, who was run over not just once, but twice simply for being a Muslim. She survived. Not so lucky was Makram Ali, who was killed outside Finsbury Mosque simply for being Muslim. Not so lucky was Muhammad Salim, who was stabbed to death simply for being a Muslim. I would like to ask the Prime Minister that in opposition, a definition of Islamophobia was adopted. In government, it has been dropped. Can I ask what's changed? Prime Minister.
Can I thank him for raising those examples of hatred in his constituency, and he's right to raise them, and we should all condemn them. Hatred in all its forms should be condemned by all of us in this House, and that includes anti-Muslim hatred as well, and we intend to act on it.
What about the hundreds of thousands of girls trafficked, sexually abused, tortured, some even murdered by your fellow Muslims, the Pakistani grooming gangs? Shock out. Silence on that. Perhaps silence, because the very definition that he's proposing we adopt says that even talking about the grooming gangs is a form of Islamophobia. These are screenshots from the All-Party Parliamentary Group report, and it says, if you try and say that I'm just using my free speech rights to criticize Islam, you know, as Shokat Adam says, free speech should be protected, every religion should be criticized. Well, the actual report, which I'm sure he didn't read because, you know, he was too busy doing something else. The actual report says, the recourse to the notion of free speech and a supposed right to criticize Islam results in nothing more than another subtle form of anti-Muslim racism, whereby the criticism humiliates, marginalizes, and stigmatizes Muslims. So if you criticize Islam, you're guilty of Islamophobia. And if you say, well, no, I'm just exercising my free speech rights, this is just a supposed right to criticize Islam. So your ability to criticize Islam is not a right, and if you try and appeal to that apparently fictitious right, then it's just compounding the fact that the criticism is Islamophobic. And this is what they want to make law. This is what the Labour Party actually supported before they were in government. And then it says, under here, another example of Islamophobia includes, and this is participants reporting, they were told that Muhammad is a paedophile. This comment does not, in a strictly grammatical sense, have the victim themselves as the subject, but is rather an example of the criticism of Islam as it is actually articulated in experience, yet clearly it is aimed at and can achieve harm to individual Muslims, and is not rooted in any meaningful theological debate, but rather in a racist attempt to other Muslims in general, associating them with the crime in our society, the crime which our society, oh, there's a typo there, sees as most abhorrent at all. One example of this, they say, is the issue of grooming gangs. So grooming gangs, discussing them, is Islamophobic. Now, somewhere else in the same report, from the numerous victim forms we were able to collect, we being Hope Not Hate, by the way, and I've got a very long video about Hope Not Hate coming out on Monday, we found a number of themes which served to reinforce the evidence presented to us by academic experts and community activists. We found that the racialization of Muslims has palpable consequences with both Asian, black, and white convert Muslims, won't somebody think of the poor gingers, being targeted for abuse on the grounds of their Muslimness. We also found that age-old stereotypes and tropes about Islam, such as sexual profligacy and paedophilia or Islam and violence, and their modern-day iteration in the, and this is in scare quotes, Asian grooming gangs labels re-emerge in discourses and dispositions which heighten vulnerability of Muslims to hate crimes. Basically, if you talk about the grooming gangs, you're committing a hate crime. This is what Shokat Adam says. Why am I reading this? Well, in what universe are the concerns of the British public and their vulnerable daughters being made present by this discourse? They're not. We are not being represented by the time allotted to these ethnic grievances and the attempt to insulate a foreign religion from criticism in our parliament. Thank you for the super chat, sir. I appreciate it. So, Should we allow this to happen? Does this happen, by the way, with native politicians? Of course it does. As I've just been rattling off, the Lib Dems are obsessed with the European Union and international rules-based order and signalling their progressive credentials from the safe, leafy suburb which is 99% English like Bath. They're YIMBYs, but not for the migrants that they advocate importing, of course. They're YIMBYs for garden parties instead. So are you still going to get those demented leftists, even if you restrict the ability to hold a position of public office, the ability to be employed by the civil service, the ability to work on the local council, if you restrict that to natives? Yes. However, as I said in my, I would say, correction to Tucker Carlson's interview with Piers Morgan, white leftists are our problem. Just because they are a problem doesn't mean I want my people demographically replaced. So no, I don't think that I can make friends with the Pakistanis or the Bangladeshis who are currently sitting in my parliament justifying censoring conversations about the grooming gangs while their co-ethnics perpetrate such crimes, or as Iqbal Muhammad did, either encouraging that we give more foreign aid to respective third world countries and also defending cousin marriage. That's something that he did, remember. So, after this, I posted the following clip from my GB News interview. And it's fairly long, you can go and watch the clip in your own time, but the caption is what matters. The British people are not represented by the sons and daughters of India, Pakistan and Bangladesh using Parliament to bicker about how best to import millions of their kin from the subcontinent. We should ban those without native British ancestry from being MPs. We should be closing our doors to the third world without anyone in Parliament putting pressure from foreign lobbies or ethnic loyalties over what is in our national interest. Frame it. Print it. Stand by every syllable. I should expect patriots in the chat. Thank you very much. Now, people thought, and if you scroll down to the comments, oh, by the way, on here, someone asked, is there an update on the Michael Gove footage? I actually spoke about it during the interview, so it's funny GB News allowed me to speak about it. The only updates I can provide is I've been banned from the physical premises of the Unheard Club. Thanks. Petty. But if people want to see it, they can still go and make comments. But look, lots of people in the comments, some of them were bickering with me, but other people were expressing surprise that I had taken this based position. It's like, guys, I've held this position for ages. I understand if, you know, somebody doesn't pay attention to all of my output, but it's really quite funny when I hear people going, oh, you've been way more hardline recently. No. No, I've always said exactly what I think. I've never been told what I can't say. I've actually gotten myself in trouble frequently because I've just said exactly what's on my mind. And if people are confused about like how the moving parts of me don't quite fit together, anyone who saw my recent Spotify Wrapped and thought, how does he have this music taste but also those opinions? It's because I don't have a carefully constructed artifice that I present to the world, which is entirely coherent. Instead, I don't think before I speak. I just do things without a plan, and so I just present myself to you and try to be authentic as possible, because living any other way would cause me immense cognitive dissonance, stress me out. I'm not going to play these like weird status games that everyone else plays and ultimately fails in doing so anyway. And if I disconnected myself from my instincts, which I just go by, I wouldn't have any credibility and I wouldn't have been nearly successful. So anyway, so I've always had this line consistently. Maybe we'll talk about how I got in trouble in a different fashion later, because okay, well, I'll mention it now, just as an aside. So, there is a fairly prominent figure. Actually, I don't know if anyone watched the Timcast episode last night. Let me find it. So, last night there was this episode of Timcast IRL with Milo and George Santos. Chaos, right? And I don't agree with what Milo said about Charlie and Erica Cook, though I do find Milo entertaining. I don't engage in all the various dramas. I know that the Groypers aren't a fan of Milo because of the things that he said about Nick. I'm not involved in these disputes. I just have a kind of nostalgia for when Milo used to do like college campus tours and annoy everyone. He's an entertaining figure, as is Nick, as are all these people. Right. Anyway, besides the point. This episode is important. You should listen to it because there's a portion in the episode where Tim expresses basically the same sentiment I have, and it's why I have a lot of respect for Tim. It's why I've always had great respect for Carl. And it's why, actually, people don't have negative stories about these people in the same way that careers have been ended because, other people have been total hypocrites doing drink and drugs and cheating on their wives and not saying what they believe and being paid the $7,000. Tim said at one point that after he had expressed frustration with his show when Dave Landau was on, and right before he announced that Alison was pregnant with his first child, that he was thinking of quitting. And someone had swooped in and tried to suggest that they buy the show from him and either operate it on his behalf or that they run the back end and just, try and hem in what he says. So make sure that you don't get too emotionally expressive, make sure you don't put the business at risk with the fact that you impulsively might close it down one day, and, maybe you don't talk about certain topics. And Milo alluded that he and Tim had encountered the same sort of people making the same sort of offers. So I would like to say in the last week, I've had something similar, and I hope I don't get in trouble by saying this, but I've been working on attracting interest in various startups and projects because I think we need to let 1,000 flowers bloom on the right, and I think we need citadels of our own that aren't captured by the Marshall Network, for example, that aren't just more containment fronts, that talk a pre-prepared line that doesn't resonate with people. And we were attracting some interest. And then a very, very prominent figure in this space that everyone would know, which I'm not able to name, didn't like something that I put out recently. You might be able to guess what. And saw it as a criticism of a collective group. And they also didn't like what felt like a personal criticism of them and their ideas. And they were going to respond publicly to me, own me with facts and logic. And instead of doing that, they decided to voice their displeasure at me privately and discourage people from being interested in the project that I am involved in, that I am trying to help get off the ground. So, what Tim was saying in that people will hold hypothetical opportunities out in front of you, the promise of fortune and fame, or being invited to nice parties, or having to do an awful lot less for an awful lot of money so long as you don't talk about one particular thing. And Tim didn't take that offer, he didn't sip from that poison chalice. I'm just telling you now, nobody has ever told me what to say, and nobody has ever told me what I can't say. And if anyone is interested in trying to give me money in exchange, in a quid pro quo, to get me to not talk about things that I think are true or interesting, I have two very simple words for you. Fuck off. Fuck off. I don't care that I have been potentially cost money here. I would actually have rather been trashed in public, because at least that's manly to do. But instead, this is... right-wing politics, unfortunately, is just a secondary school girls' lunch table full of gossip. I heard wind today from another prominent figure in the British right-wing space who does a lot of good work, that apparently they were spreading rumours about me having an affair behind my wife's back. For no reason at all. For no reason. They stand to gain nothing from that. I heard from a trustworthy second party today that it was being spoken about in the television newsroom. Why? Because that's just what this space is filled with. It's filled with those kinds of people. And so if you ever allow those kinds of people to have financial leverage over you, you're a mug. And that's why I never have. That's why Tim hasn't, that's why Carl hasn't, and that's why those men have integrity over time. And so, I say all of this to say, when people are like, oh, well, Connor never used to be this space, no, I've always held this opinion. It's just that if I haven't agreed with everyone in the space over time, it's because I thought they were bad news, I thought they had bad vibes, I thought they had bad instincts, and I didn't want to hitch my horse to their wagon. It doesn't mean I didn't believe certain things, and I've always been vocal about what I thought. And the fact that I've always been vocal about what I thought I'd pull up this week. So, remember, I think it was like 2 streams ago or something, that we spoke about the Unheard piece that was a sort of hit piece on me trying to sink James Orr's prospects in reform by virtue of him being connected with Vance and therefore the whole Groyper war in the US, which I'm sure Vance is sick of, but also saying, oh, well, there's a rising Christian nationalism in the UK. Reform doesn't want to look too Christian. Oh, God forbid. Why would Christianity be of political importance when people are getting locked up and thrown in prison for praying silently in the head outside abortion facilities when abortion has just been legalized for pretty much any reason except selective abortion up to birth? I wonder why people might be taking more of an interest in Christianity. Anyway, so this was Sam Rubinstein, the guy who had written the piece. And again, I don't want to be a dick to him because he's been perfectly polite to me other than that sort of bitchy article, but I've got no reason to go after him. But I'm only bringing this up to say that he had pointed out that during the Spectator debate with Michael Gove, I had said, I don't think any religion other than Christian should be given a platform in public life, and I don't think anyone without native British ancestry should be employed by the state. Not just as an MP, but again, as a local councillor. I don't think you should be able to run for office. I don't think you should be working in the civil service. There are just too many ethnic conflicts of interest there. And I think Sam is a multicultural liberal, or perhaps a right-wing liberal, though ardent Zionist, so yet again, it would be utterly inconceivable for an Indian to be running Israel. Anyway, but I've always had this position. So the fact that I've been saying this for a while shouldn't have shocked anyone. But you know who it did shock? Stella Creasy. Now, Stella Creasy is in the running for the worst MP in Parliament. Not because she is the most ardent lobbyist for mass migration, though I think that is the friend-enemy issue, and I've seen people try to make it other issues. But the answer to every question is always our people. And if you aren't conserving the demographic future, the cultural integrity of our nation, if you aren't conserving our people, our families, our loved ones, then you aren't conserving anything. You don't stand for anything. So that is the dividing line. That is the friend-enemy. And in one of the ways that Stella Creasy does not secure our demographic future, actually ensures our obsolescence, is with her demented obsession with abortion. Because Stella Creasy became marginally famous for taking her newborn into Parliament and demanding that Parliament accommodate mothers' abilities to take their newborns into Parliament. And again, perhaps I'm soft-hearted. I'm not one of those people that thinks women should be excluded from Parliament entirely, because I do think that women, as an identity group that does tangibly exist, has a set of interests, and so they should be able to discuss those interests and organise politically for it. I will note that the number of female MPs and congresswomen and senators in the States and in Australia, well, the number of awful ones do significantly outweigh the number of good ones. So perhaps they aren't always acting in women's interests. However, Stella Creasy, I would just say, if you don't feel equipped to be able to take your child into Parliament and also serve your constituents, or you don't feel equipped to raise your baby and also serve your constituents, your baby matters more, and so that you should sacrifice your political career. Otherwise, it's just an act of total narcissism on your part. And I'm pretty sure that your own constituents, at this point, would probably appreciate you sacrificing your political career, though you do live in a pretty comfortable Labour safe seat. Where's her seat, actually? I know it's a London-based one. Walthamstow. Okay, wonderful. But Stella Creasy was the one who was lobbying for abortion up to birth, and her private member's bill was tabled on the same day as Tonya Antoniazzi's one, which ended up getting voted through. And Tonya Antoniazzi's one only ended up getting voted through because she didn't abolish sex-selective abortion. Stella Creasy wanted to abolish abortion for all reasons, and she insisted that we do it now, because otherwise, if you look over at the US, we'll literally become the Handmaid's Tale. Again, why is Christianity relevant in politics? Because our enemies are quaking in their boots about their ability to continue aborting their children in the thousands and millions. I think we have something like 250,000 abortions every single day. Sorry, every single year. Not every single day, blimey. That would be horrific. 1 in every 3 pregnancies are projected to have been aborted in 2024. So, Stella Creasy is obsessed with flooding our country with foreign criminals, because she says that Shabana Mahmood's mild asylum reforms, despite her creating new safe and legal routes to bring more people into the country, but I don't think Stella actually read the brief from her own party, because she's an idiot. She said that would require ICE-style raids, and it's like, oh, please, I would love the government that your fevered imagination thinks we have. But at the same time as she's encouraging like limitless numbers of foreign nationals to come into our country and replace us, she's encouraging every woman in the country to have the ability to kill her unborn child up to the moment that it's crowning. So, I don't take any moral lectures from Stella Creasy. However, it is important that she decided to quote retweet my clip, because then began a campaign against me to get me deplatformed from GB News and get GB News an Ofcom strike. And those who don't know Ofcom is the regulatory body instantiated by Tony Blair that demands that broadcasters have certain standards of propriety. So, for example, they have to cover climate change in a non-neutral way. They have to affirm that it's real and there's a crisis. They have to have balance. And what this means is they always have to have some demented open borders communist arguing for why your ethnicity doesn't exist, but should also be eradicated for historical guilt. And at the same time, they have to platform a conservative, which means someone completely tepid who's just going, whoa, slow down on the ethnocide a little bit. We can't do it all at once. I mean, note, for example, that ridiculous question time panel that they put together the other day with all of the respective parties. It had a Liberal Democrat and a Green Party member. Liberal Democrat was Daisy Cooper, who I think is a deputy leader. Green Party was Zach Polanski, you know, the crooked teeth tip whisperer who has fashioned the Green Party into a coalition of resentful foreigners. Like a man who changes his name to be more Jewish than it actually is, who thinks that there's no such thing as British ethnicity and that everyone can be British if they want to, teams up with a guy who got elected as a Green councillor and said, Allahu Akbar, this is for Gaza. Again, where are the British people represented in any of this? Neither of them should be allowed in political life. And then you had Mike Tapp, who charisma vacuum, trying to be a social media star for Labour in Dover and Deal. You had a Conservative, and I can't even remember his name, he's that forgettable. And then you had Zia Yusuf, again, who isn't an elected MP, but because, you know, Paul Marshall wants to make him Prime Minister one day, he's now doing all the Reform's media rounds. Bear in mind, the remigration position, when polled, YouGov found that 45% of the public thinks that a vast quantity of legal migrants should be sent back as well as illegal. That is more than the Lib Dems and the Greens voting bloc put together. That's more than Labour and the Greens put together at this point, because Labour have fallen down to 14% in the latest poll. They're only going to get apparently 4 seats at the next election. Total wipeout. But no remigration advocates were on the panel. Curious. Anyway, just to say this, Sally Riggett. So, Ofcom doesn't demand representation for our positions. Instead, they only cleave in one direction. They are the Cthulhu, which Swind left. And so, the likes of the BBC don't get penalised when they... Emily Maitlis, I think, was the one who had insulted Brexit voters and covered Brexit badly. They don't really get penalised. Sky News doesn't get penalised when they, you know, disclosed my personal information to my interlocutor back when I did that debate live on air privately. They tried to, because I had asked for an appearance fee and she hadn't, and then she was complaining, oh, why am I here? I'm so tired. Why am I on air? Explain this to you. I was like, well, you agreed to come on. Like, you're getting paid for this. She was like, I'm not getting paid. Are you getting paid? And I was like, yeah, because I asked for an appearance fee. If you didn't ask for an appearance fee, that's an idiot tax on you, idiot. So then they disclosed to her how much I was getting paid, and they said, oh, because, you know, we didn't offer her pay, but we now need to offer her pay. We want to make it equal. Do you mind taking a pay cut? It's like, no, she's a vindictive race communist, and you're a bunch of liars that tried to ambush me, and you promised me in writing ahead of time you're actually going to give me the money that I'm owed. And I put in a complaint to Ofcom because they also leaked my information, and then the Telegraph ran a hit piece on me, like Telegraph, noted right-wing newspaper, the Telegraph. They ran a hit piece on me without asking me for comment, but they quoted my interlocutor as to how absurd the debate was. So then I complained to IPSO about it, and neither of them, of course, got punished. Because never. Anyway, point is, Ofcom have now been alerted to the fact that I made these comments. And the rather unattractive ginger clone of my co-host Tate from across the pond decided to do me dirty with the screenshots here. It's fine. I'm not that fragile, I promise. But now, apparently, Ofcom has been Ofcom told the National it received a complaint and was investigating. So this is off the back of Stella Creasy saying, how GB News can retain its Ofcom regulation when it spews racist hatred like this is beyond me. Also, sorry, I totally forgot to address Stella Creasy's tweet. If you notice in the chat, if you notice in the top line, by this logic, both me and Nigel Farage are both kicked out of Parliament given our Huguenot ancestry. So, you notice a few things wrong with that sentence. Let's play spot the grammatical or spelling error in that sentence. Because the first one is, I mean, it can be me and Nigel, but it's usually Nigel and I. Nigel Farage and I. Second one is Nigel Farage is not capitalised. The F is not capitalised. Third one is Parliament is not capitalised. Fourth one is there should be a comma after ancestry, but have you spotted the major mistake? Stella Creasy, who cares so much about her Huguenot ancestry, she's misspelled fucking Huguenot. So, sorry, I don't think it's a core part of your identity, actually. I think you're just using it as a Mott and Bailey to ensure that our parliament is filled with foreigners lobbying for more foreigners to come into the country. However, what's escaped Stella Creasy's attention is that she has native British ancestry. And I did point this out to her, by the way, in a quote retweet about a day or so later after everyone else had ratioed her. And I just said, I still think she should be kicked out of Parliament by her constituents for her ghoulish obsession with aborting unborn children and opening our borders to dangerous foreign criminals. But it is interesting about the sort of antibody reaction that I've provoked with the suggestion that we shouldn't have foreigners in our Parliament lobbying for bringing in more foreigners. Basically, they shouldn't be able to hijack an individualistic, high-trust democratic system that was formulated over 1,000 years on the basis of tradition in an island where its demographics were upwards of 90% unmolested for all that time. They shouldn't be able to hijack that for their ethnic and Islamic or Hindu or even Jewish concerns. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. Instead, we're a Christian country. We've always been a Christian country. And the interests of the native host majority should be put first, because every one of those other ethnicities and traditions have a country of their own from which I would be excluded from holding office. Do you know it would be totally absurd for me to go to Pakistan and demand that I become an MP, even a local councillor? I don't think I'm allowed to do that, according to Pakistani law. You shouldn't even be able to do it if you're a dual citizen, because you shouldn't have your loyalties divided if you're going to serve the country. Anyway, I just find it curious that The National announces that Ofcom have received a complaint and they're probing it off the back of Stella Creasy drawing everyone's attention to it. They also note Stella Creasy's tweet in here. Did they capitalize it? Spokesperson for Ofcom said, "We've received a complaint which we're assessing against our rules and in line with our procedures. Bear in mind this was GB News Digital, so it's not even Ofcom regulated." I wonder what the comments say on this. I didn't even check them. Oh, they're just whinging. I'm sure that the National are the rag that complained about Bow during the cancellation from Reform, right? Where he said that Scotland's greatest exports are smack and iron brew. As this comment said, quell surprise. Anyway, this then prompted the following campaign. This is one of the most ridiculous parts of all this. Stop Funding Hate have been a lobbying group that have tried to get GB News cancelled ever since its inception. They've tried to withdraw all its advertisers. I think they got the likes of McDonald's and M&S and IKEA to pull out on basically day one, and GB News was losing money hand over fist for the first year until they all started coming back because their ratings were good. Chat, do you notice something about what they've done here with my post? I'll read the caption in order to give the chat time to catch up and spot the difference from my original tweet, other than the fact that these psychopaths have it in light mode. They say, GB News published a YouTube video in which a contributor rails against MPs whose parents were born in India, Pakistan or Bangladesh, contrasting them with the native population. On X, he goes to demand that those without British ancestry, native British ancestry, be banned from being MPs. Help us alert advertisers on this toxic GB News video. Go to the video and screenshot the advertiser. Message the brand urging them to pull their ads from GB News' YouTube channel. Tag us here to let us know. Now, why do you think they blurred out the first paragraph? Why do you think that they decided to... Is it because it offended their sensibilities so much? Or is it because, with the additional crucial context, they're worried that people will believe me? Or agree with me, rather. So I did respond, and then, ratioed them into the Earth's core by saying, I stand by what I said. We deserve to be represented in our own country. Of course, I did a spelling mistake. You've done nothing but win since GB News launched. You're a disingenuous smear outfit and nobody cares if you're upset. Cry about it. And I stand by that. Do you notice how yet again Stella Creasy, these people, the National, never make an affirmative case for why our parliament should be packed to the rafters with, I think, 35 MPs who were born overseas and even more who share no native British ancestry? Do you notice they never argue why we should be ruled by foreigners? Because they can't. Because at the same time that they insist that everyone is a blank slate, that everyone is as British as you and me, they defend the ability for said MPs to lobby on behalf of their ethnic interests, because they do actually notice differences between groups. They say that these people are marginalised or oppressed, or many of them use the language of colourblind liberalism to launder their own ethnic interests. Conspicuously, you always get advocates for colourblind meritocracy, and they turn out to, be Indian themselves and just want more Indians in the country. See Priti Patel, see Rishi Sunak, see Kemi Badenoch with lobbying for an abolition of caps on student and study visas, citing the fact that she was a first-generation immigrant. Note how they never make the affirmative case for this, and at the same time they try and sustain the cognitive dissonance of saying we're all blank slates, we're all as British as each other if we're born in the same place, but also this person from India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh is historically oppressed by the British Empire, and so should be allowed to lobby for the redress of their grievances and importing limitless numbers of their co-ethnics at your expense because you're white and you deserve it. Diversity is our strength until it's our punishment, right? So sorry, this contradiction won't last. Most people can see it for what it is, and most people do not feel represented by Iqbal Muhammad, Shabana Mahmood, and Aspana Begum bickering over which one of them gets to import their co-ethnics fastest. It's not good enough. And so I stand by everything. I stand by all of that. Nobody without any native British ancestry should be an MP. Nobody who is not a Christian should be an MP either. And again, this is not the position of any political party. This is just my position. And if you notice, me saying this position will get me excluded from any political party. So why am I saying it? Because I believe it. I don't care what opportunities are dangled in front of me and then snatched away because I say something that is disliked by the ruling liberal establishment that has either covered up or enabled atrocities or stood idly by and done nothing to stop them. I don't care if it sabotages someone's carefully crafted electoral strategy to waltz through the door on Downing Street in 4 years and do sweet fuck all about the problems that actually face us, because it takes more than just one man to do something about it. And if you fill your team with complete invertebrates, complete inadequates, cowards, and imbeciles, then nothing gets done. You get thwarted by the entrenched, moneyed interests in the civil service. So I exist to roll the pitch. I exist to popularise certain ideas, or make it more permissible for people to say what they already believe, or to articulate their instincts. And you know what? Our instinct is, we are not represented by this. We are not represented by this. We are not represented by this. None of us are represented by this ethnic sectarian lobbying in our parliament. Now, this is the malicious version. And this pile on me, I can take it, I don't care. I'm a very disagreeable man. I scored before 0 on agreeableness when I did that old sort of Jordan Peterson Ocean test years ago. As a bloke, I can take it. However, I was not the first to be embroiled in a controversy on this topic. Some of you may have seen this tweet by Lucy White. Now, Lucy is, or was, a frequent guest on Talk TV and GB News. Apparently, she has now been blacklisted because of this controversy. Now, during the budget, Naz Nuzgani, who was elected in 2010, I think, with the Conservatives and the Cameron government, which I think was, blimey, 15 years ago, today or yesterday. But Nuzgani is now one of the deputy speakers of the House. And for some reason, she's wearing a suit and a tie. Very odd. And Lucy White pointed out that such a senior person in a position of influence over the House, during the budget statement, announcing that she was displeased by the OBR leaking the entire budget a few hours before the announcement. She was born in Kashmir, in Pakistan. I know Kashmir is a contested territory. I'm not going to get into the ancient blood feuds of the various tribes of the subcontinent. Just know that she's basically from Greater India. Lucy said, very plainly and simply, there should not be a single person born in Pakistan in the UK House of Commons. Now, I would quibble with that, just because if someone who was completely English and was administrating Pakistan back in the colonial days, and then after the fall of colonialism came back, such an Englishman should be able to be an MP. However, at this point, no Pakistani should be in Parliament. Nobody who is from Pakistan without any English ancestry should be from Parliament. No Pakistani born in Britain without any English ancestry, or Welsh, or Scottish, or Irish, any native British ancestry, should be in Parliament. Because it's just a conflict of interest, I'm afraid. And unfortunately, and look, again, we make general rules here. Perhaps I'm being too generous. I would say you have to have some ancestry to circumvent that virulent ethnic tribalism that is demonstrated everywhere, basically, except for the Anglosphere, because we're all quite individualistic. We take people as we meet them. And our individualism, our good grace, our manners is being hijacked by that tribalism at the moment, which requires a correction. But I would say there is also cause for pessimism for people who do have native ancestry from our royals, but also from elsewhere. Same in America, right? Barack Obama only ever identified as black, despite having white American ancestry. Over in the UK, we had Bob Dylan. We all remember the saga of Bob Dylan, right? When every single politician was more concerned about his calls for violence against the IDF than they were about the fact that he was gloating and gleeful about dispossessing the native English of their own country. And it's usually because the politicians are much more concerned about the demographic and territorial integrity of Israel than they are about England. I would just like the same level of concern to be shown towards my countrymen by the same politicians that are meant to be governing over it and are not actually headquartered in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. That would be very nice. Thank you, Michael Gove. That'd be very nice, Richard Tice, who goes on anti-Semitism marches, but when asked by Stephen Edgington, do you care that Britain is going to be minority white by 2063, he says, I'll be long gone by then. Who cares? Anyway, back to this tweet. So, this tweet, as you can see, was viewed 6 million times. And other than Ant Middleton saying this is something that will change when I take office, the responses were scathing. Now, let's start with Kay Burley. Kay Burley is a Sky News anchor who got it wrong on Twitter, saying that Carl had interviewed Liz Truss and basically insinuated he had repeated his joke about Jess Phillips on the show. And I had to tell her, issue a correction or you will receive legal action. So she had to retract. How embarrassing. So Kay Burley is not exactly a bastion of journalistic integrity. And she's saying to Lucy, am I missing something or is this a spoof account? Yes, Kay, you are missing something. You are a delusional blank slate progressive who is very wealthy and insulated from the consequences of your own politics. And you're encountering the Zoomers. The Zoomers who have grown up in this desolated country with rapid and unwanted demographic change, with the culture of the UK and all of its degraded aesthetics, with depleted job opportunities and expensive housing, and the very real prospect of being dispossessed of our own homeland. So yeah, what you're missing is the fact that the conditions have changed, and so have people's politics. And so an increasing number of young men, but even a few young women like Lucy, and Lucy's very nice, by the way. She's not like some e-girls. We are sick to the back teeth of it, and we're not going to play your game anymore of pretending that literally everyone is as British as you and me when they are engaging in ethnic politics. And people will be going, well, hang on a minute. Nuzgani is not as bad as Iqbal Muhammad and Shbana Begum, not Shumaima Begum, and Shabana Mahmood. You know, she's barely even mentioned Palestine, even though she's a Muslim. She is in a 99% white British seat, and they keep electing her as a Conservative. Okay, I've got 2 rebuttals to that. First of all, and this slightly insulting headline is from the Indian Express. I'm so glad I have to go to the Indian Express to understand my own domestic politics. Nusrat Ghani, took her oath in Urdu when she was sworn in 2017. When she was sworn back in, by the way, because she retained her constituency. She's not even speaking English in the House. So yeah, she is doing sectarian ethnopolitics. Because you, a Pakistani woman, and a Muslim, are swearing the oath on the Quran in Urdu. I couldn't do the same on the Christian Bible in Pakistan. So I just expect the same standard. You shouldn't be an MP. And also, the reason that she was made an MP... Let's get this up. There we go. Oh, bugger. Right, I don't have the link. The reason she was made an MP... Aha, I do. Here we go. Drum roll. Brilliant. Is because of David Cameron. This is a very real headline written in the Times in 2022. David Cameron, who terraformed the Tory party to try and beat the allegations that they were the nasty party, as Theresa May said, and instead modelled himself, as did Michael Gove, as the heir to Blair, basically imbibing all of Tony Blair's progressive New Labour values. David Cameron boasted that we were all pale, male and stale, we were all white men, so I did something about diversity. He did all women and minority shortlists. He did speeches to rooms full of Muslims saying, we need more Muslims in business, we need more Muslims in parliament, we need more Muslims as senior members of the Conservative Party. Well, it turns out you're going to get more Muslims in the Labour Party, in Reform, and it turns out that various Muslim candidates were also astroturfed to the top of the Conservative Party. So, Nuz Ghani is in Parliament because she benefited from the DEI shortlists of David Cameron, because she, for whatever reason, is allowed to give her oath of allegiance in Urdu, which, by the way, if the speaker and that themselves do not speak Urdu, they can't actually verify whether or not she actually took that oath. And she's allowed to do it on the Quran, which is another problem, because the Quran does not have a prohibition against lying. Of course, there is the famous taqiyya principle, where you can lie to unbelievers, but it's just not the same morality as Christianity, which gave us the basis for common law and Blackstone's formulation and our high-trust society, and shaped our nuclearized family units that meant that we extend moral consideration and manners and grace to people outside our immediate clan. In fact, it's made us, in some cases, vulnerable to having an outgroup preference, and thereby engaging in suicidal empathy, pathological compassion, and inviting these tribal, highly in-group preferential foreign peoples into our country and giving them the same franchise and privileges as a native. Totally insane. But the Quran doesn't have the same values as Christianity, and so you can't build the same high-trust civic polity on the back of a fractured view of metaphysics, truth, life, death, justice. Doesn't work. This is why multiculturalism, but also a multi-faith society, just doesn't work. Sorry, you need to have one religion that you base your state on. I would say it's the religion which seems to have been vindicated in all times and all places as the correct one, which is Christianity. And so, I don't think any other religion should be able to have a position in public life. I think we just need a blanket ban on any except for Christianity. I mean, look, we can litigate the denominations later. I'm not going to do the Stephen Wolfe thing in Case for Christian Nationalism, not just because I disagree with his theology, but where he goes, yeah, we're going to have a Christian nationalist state, but, you know, we're going to kick the Baptists out because they don't share my view on baptism, and the Catholics have dual loyalty to the Vatican. Trust me, most Catholics are not happy with the Vatican at the moment, and they don't agree with me on transubstantiation. I mean, this was actually the basis for the original Test Acts of, what was it, 1763? Which is what Sam Rubinstein was joking about me bringing back. You had to prove that you didn't believe in the doctrine of transubstantiation, that you had to take the Lord's Supper as a purely symbolic measure, and so you had to prove you weren't a Catholic. And then this led, obviously, to the reign of James II, where he tried to make it a Catholic parliament, and then the Glorious Revolution, not so glorious, where William of Orange came in and instituted the 1689 Bill of Rights. Anyway, Bill of Rights was good. We're getting rid of too much of it. But I do think we need a form of Test Act that means that you are committed to Christianity. Even if you struggle, and I'm sure people in my audience do that watch it, right? Even if you struggle with believing, and hey, of course I have at times, you know, I maintain a position of constant epistemic humility because I can't wrap my head around everything in the Bible, you know. Even if you struggle with that, you need to at least demonstrate your willingness to defer to the ancient customs and liberties, the religious faith, and the majority people of the nation that you are serving. So it should be a deference, right? Anyway, so go back to Nazgani. She's benefited from being a DEI candidate in a safe Conservative seat, much like Rishi Sunak in the seat that he took over from William Hague. And Rishi Sunak couldn't win an election, not internally in the Conservative Party, not when he was put to the electorate. He delivered the Conservative Party the worst defeat in 100 years. And was also, you know, beaten by Liz Truss in the internal leadership election, and was only installed by his friends, including the likes of Michael Gove and Dougie Smith and Manira Mirza and all those types, because they cooed out Liz Truss with the help of the media and the banks and the like. And again, even if you don't like Liz, if they can do it to her, they can do it to you too. So learn that lesson. That's what J.D. Vance said, right? So Nazgani is not a shining example of an excellent MP and the reason why we should keep foreigners in Parliament. So very weak argument. But you had MPs also descending on Lucy. You know, solidarity, same struggle here. Stella Creasy I don't think went for her, but Tim Farron, who used to be the leader of the Liberal Democrats and basically got struggle sessioned out by his own party because he said he was a Christian, and so as a Christian he had to consider homosexuality a sin, even though he wouldn't take any measures to ban it himself, or wouldn't. He hates the sin, not the sinner. Frankly, personally reasonable. I mean, look, you know, I've got friends, they're gay. I hope that they, if possible, change their mind and live a wholesome family life. Because actually one of my friends said to me, if he had a choice, he would choose otherwise, because the permanent tragedy of his sexuality is that he can never have a child with someone he loves. And he quite rightly struggles with the likes of surrogacy and IVF. So I hope, if you can, make a more wholesome and constructive choice that allows you to have a loving family. But thank you for the super chat. Thanks for the encouragement during Saturday before last stream. I've since returned to Mass. I'll continue to pray for you and your grandfather well. God bless you. Thank you, sir. And I'm glad that you've gone back to Mass, and I hope that you make a positive contribution to your congregation and revive it. You should be pillars of leadership if you're a man, or a member of the community if you're a woman. You know, my wife's in the choir. She's sings the psalms. It's wonderful. It adds a sort of sense of beauty and togetherness, and wants to attract, and people are attracted to beauty and goodness, right? What they're not attracted to is the Liberal Democrat Party. And Tim Farron replied to Lucy White with, "In the old Twitter days, I often spoke out against cancellation and for free speech. But this isn't free speech." Okay, so we've just found your friend enemy line. It is free speech. It is just speech. It's actually talking about a constitutional matter, saying that we shouldn't have foreigners in Parliament as a matter of national security. It's a perfectly acceptable principle. Pakistan does it. America does it for the presidency. America should do it for all of Congress and the Senate. They should do it for dog catcher, frankly. I mean, look at I nearly said look at Somalia. Look at Minneapolis. Look at Dearborn, Michigan. Look at areas of Texas where they're erecting monkey god statues. Look at North Carolina. Like, these sort of Hindu and Muslim enclaves, which are terrible. Shouldn't have them. So Tim Farron's friend-enemy distinction is whether or not we can flood Parliament with foreigners. Okay? Enemy. He says this isn't free speech, it's despicable and wicked. Yet again, no affirmative case for why we should be ruled by foreigners. This site has become a cesspit. I've reported this post just out of curiosity to see if what's his name has any morals at all. Bear in mind the Liberal Democrats are currently trying to get Elon Musk banned from the UK because there are too many mean comments on their tweets. Tim, piss off the blue sky, you coward. But, of course, this post isn't going to get banned because it is exactly free discourse. So, cry about it, I suppose. Then we've got Stephen Flynn, who's the head of the SNP in Westminster. He's not the head of the SNP, that's John Sweeney. Not to be confused with John Sweeney, the sozzled, disgraced former Panorama journalist who has a habit of shouting incoherently at me anytime he sees me. Stephen Flynn said the Deputy Speaker certainly doesn't need me to speak for her, but she knows that we all stand with her, against this odious racism. Noticing differences is not racism. I know in the blank slate liberal worldview that literally everyone from everywhere is indistinguishable, and as long as we hold hands and shut our eyes and do the Care Bear stare and pretend there are no differences, then we'll all live in John Lennon's Imagine. But those of us in the real world can recognise this is a Pakistani woman. That doesn't mean she's a bad person. I don't think I agree with her on literally anything. Her metaphysical doctrine of the good is completely incompatible with mine. It's incompatible with the traditions that built my country, Stephen, but I'm not actually trying to insult her. I'm just making a principled point to say that foreigners shouldn't be in Parliament. They shouldn't govern over us. It has been a total disaster when they have. Actually, said disaster, I can't believe I didn't get this tweet thread up. Speaking of foreign disasters, over my tweet, and I'm apparently going to get a hit piece by this wretched man, but over my tweet, Sundar Katwala decided to throw a fit about this, and he also threw a fit about Lucy's tweet. Now, Sundar Katwala is the head of British Future. He's also part of this independent inquiry into Southport, along with Fraser Nelson and Sajid Javid, the former Home Secretary who said so what about the English disappearing from their major cities, becoming a minority in London. And a bunch of other awful people. Dame Sarah Khan, Hope Not Hate's best friend, who wrote Michael Gove's definition of extremism. Michael Gove presented the definition by saying, Britain is a multi-ethnic, multi-racial, multi-faith, liberal democracy, and our diversity is our strength. Anyway, so Sundar Katwala is the former General Secretary of the Fabian Society, the socialist society that has a wolf in sheep's clothing as their emblem. And Sundar Katwala screenshotted my post. He screenshotted a post from Ant Middleton, Ant Total Patriot, good man. He screenshotted Lucy's posts, and he wrote, writing a column on efforts to shift norms on race, even calls for all ethnic minorities, Rishi Sunak, Kemi Badenoch and Priti Patel, Shabana Mahmood and Nuz Ghani to be ineligible for parliament or leadership roles, which we all advocate. Okay. As I pointed out beneath this completely arduous and totally shit thread, every single MP he listed there has been a total disaster because all they've ever done is lobby to import more of their co-ethnics against the express wishes of the electorate who vote for lower migration whenever they're asked. Since 1974 and including the Brexit referendum. And instead, hey presto, we get ethnic minorities shortlisted on DEI candidate lists by David Cameron, by all the Conservatives, by Keir Starmer. And so, we get them propelled to positions of prominence in government. Kemi Badenoch, Rishi Sunak, Priti Patel, and Nadim Zahawi, Alok Sharma, who's born in India, Sajid Javid, all these people, right? They are in government. Sajid Javid's brother runs immigration enforcement in the Home Office. Why are there Pakistani family clans running the Home Office? Because Sarah Khan's sister, Sabrina Khan, used to run Raiku. Sarah Khan ran basically Prevent and Anti-Extremism, and she was entirely an AstroTurf Home Office plant with her own charity getting bankrolled by the Home Office and with the assistance of Breakthrough Media and being supported by, Amber Rudd and obviously Theresa May. And then Sajid Javid were Home Secretary. His brother was working for the police and then goes straight over to the Home Office to work for immigration enforcement. Sorry, none of these people should be working there because on their watch, not just Islamic terrorism just got deprioritized by Prevent and then let the likes of Axel Ruda Cabana and Abi Harbi Ali and this other guy that, shot at the synagogue slip through the net. But also, on their watch, millions of people from the third world came into the country. And did any of us want it? Sorry, I've just seen a message in chat. I know you dissed Indians, but they seem to integrate okay in the UK. Define integrate. Southall is currently covered in orange rust because they've been chewing tobacco and spitting it in the street. Establishing Hindu, Sikh, or Muslim enclaves in my country and turning it into little areas of New Delhi or Calcutta is not integrating. Do you know what? Integrating does not just mean not committing crime and paying tax and having kids. I don't care if they're conservative about family values or religion. It's not my religion, it's not my family, it's not my civilization, and you're just going to get little India out of it rather than England. And I don't want to live in India, funnily enough. If I wanted to live in India, I would have gone over there rather than voted for politicians, which I didn't, which brought India to me. No, they don't integrate well, largely. I've met plenty of nice Indians, right? I've got a Hindu friend who currently isn't in the UK, was born in the UK, actually agrees with me on a hell of a lot of politics. He might disagree with me on this particular issue, but hey, whatever. Really nice guy. I met when I was out in Hungary recently a couple of really lovely Christian Pakistanis, really well educated, dressed way better than I did. And they watched my videos after I gave a talk on wokeness and the roots of liberalism, and it was very academic, right? And they said they agree with everything you said, including about the grooming gangs. We agree that our country's a state. And I just said to them, look, you look like absolute gentlemen. I've enjoyed spending time with you the last couple of days. I'm glad you're Christians, and I hope you run your country, right? I hope that those wonderful people, because there are really nice Indians, there are really nice Africans, there are really nice Pakistanis, I hope they run their country, right? I hope they run their country. I don't want them running mine. And that's totally fine. And those are the minority of very culturally proximate, well-educated, largely Christian ones. The ones that aren't that have nothing in common with me. So why the fuck would I want them to have a position of power over me? No. Sorry. I'm sick to death of this. Well, you know, they pay their tax and they're quite polite. It's like, sorry, civilization is more than just upholding a very thin social contract. Anyway, as I said in this post back to Sunda, if he had said Suella Braverman, and I said this earlier in the broadcast, because I'm quite soft-hearted and Suella's very nice, I, would have had to pause for thought. But as a general rule to safeguard our system against exploitation, against ethno-narcissism, against the likes of Indian politicians like Priti Patel calling Indians living bridges and saying that Indian diasporas exist to exert demographic and thereby democratic control to advantage India in our country, which is what Modi meant by that, by the way. Generous remittance policies, mass migration policies. Even Kemi Badenoch complained that trying to deal with India as trade minister was frustrating because any trade deal, any item on the list would immediately have, oh, and by the way, some more visas, stapled to it. And she kept having to go, no. And she was the one that wanted to abolish visa caps for study and workers. Why do you think we get 250,000 Indians every year? Why do you think Rishi Sunak in 2014, when he was working for Policy Exchange, another one of Michael Gove's outfits, thanks so much for that, he wrote a paper saying, well, Indians seem to vote Conservative more than other minorities. Still vote majority Labour, by the way. So maybe the Conservatives should change their immigration policy to import more Indians. And then, hey presto, on his watch, we got another 250,000 Indians, and he was celebrating Diwali in Downing Street. Would you call that integrated? Would you call that representation of the British people's concerns when they didn't want to be flooded with 250,000 Indians every year? No. And I'm sorry, and I'm very impassioned about this, but I'm not going to accept these like thin definitions of integration that just amount to, well, they pay their taxes. Most of them don't, by the way. 95% of all immigrants that came over as part of the Boris wave aren't net tax contributors. And even if they were, they're not going to recreate my civilization out of either habit or spite. That doesn't make them all bad people. Some of them might well be polite. So some of them, genuinely, and this is me being my most liberal, right? Some of them may well have, in the few years they are here, as some of them may be Christians, some of them may be well educated, some of them may speak perfect English, some of them may have fallen in love with a member of the natives, and some of them may have gotten married and done everything right and had a family here. And do you want to tear that family apart? I don't think that any policy of remigration that punishes people doing the right thing in infinitesimally small numbers will get anywhere. And I understand that there are some advocates who do think that. But I think that would be unjust, and I also don't think it's politically possible. Now, do I limit myself to what is politically possible? No, because otherwise I would be allowed in every party, and I'm not. But I do think that just, let's say you win power and you try to enact that, you're going to get a lot of resistance from people who have those family members. And I don't think it would be fair. But that is going to be such an infinitesimally small number, it's not even going to show up on the chart. So we don't even have to concern ourselves with it. Not at all. Because the vast majority of people act as they do back in their home countries. Do you know how we know that? Because wherever they go, they recreate their home countries. And why does their home country look the way it does? Because they act that way in their home country. Countries are the way they are because of the people in them. And I just don't want those people here. I certainly don't want them ruling over me. Anyway, so I responded scathingly to Sunda. We do still have a topic. I know I'm rambling and doing the weave, but I'll try and stay on and leave a bit of time at the end for questions and super chats. I've seen one super chat that's piled up that I haven't addressed yet, so I'm saving that. Again, if you want questions addressed, send a super chat in. It's the easiest way to catch my eye. I do still look at the chat, hence the spontaneous rant, but, direct questions, easier for super chats. Sunda said, You are sure that Suella Braverman supports her own exclusion? No, I'm not. I'm saying that if you were to offer her that bargain, she probably would. That of Kenny Badenoch is a price worth paying to exclude Shabana Mahmood, Rishi Sunak, David Lammy et al. Now, number one, I don't think Suella cares about excluding Kemi Badenoch from Parliament because Kemi Badenoch has been rather foul to her. Do you remember that she leaked to the Times the notes of the first shadow cabinet meeting while Suella was out of the country, saying that Suella was having a very public mental breakdown? So I think that actually Suella, if you said, right, Suella, if you want to exclude, non-natives or people that weren't born in Britain from Parliament, bear in mind it will exclude your leader, Kemi Badenoch. Bam! Big slam of the red button. So, very bad. But also, as Adam Wren goes here, and Adam does excellent work, he works for Open Justice, he's the one that's procuring these grooming gang transcripts, he's fantastic, right? You should be following him and supporting his work, if you can. He says, why don't you poll the question? And Sundar Katwala says, this is the relevant polling. Are British-born minorities British? Oh, Sundar, you... Okay, right. Well, I think Sundar is just dishonest, but I also think he's fucking retarded. Right. If you ask, are British-born people British? Do you think you might not be, prejudicing that? Also, let's say you remove the British-born part from the question. Two things. One, the YouGov polling on whether or not someone could be English if they're not ancestrally English. Just because it's not the majority popular opinion does not mean it's right. It means people have been misled. It's a category error. No, you can't become English. You can become British by legal designation, because ever since the 1948 British Nationality Act, we've reduced our identity to basically a passport and a bit of paperwork given out by an increasingly treasonous government. So just because people are misled into making that category error doesn't mean it's true. But also, it is possible to say that someone without native British ancestry possesses British citizenship. That does not mean they are automatically indistinguishable from the natives and thereby entitled to rule over them with a level of political power, especially in a system which gives them advantages for their race or their religion if it is non-native and non-Christian. You just want to preserve that system because you're a Fabian socialist who likes to use insults and slurs against people to try and get them cancelled and ostracized from being able to participate in the democratic process and actually shape politics, because you would like to incrementally advance us towards, well, either a socialist state or at least seemingly accruing benefits to yourself, potentially other people who fit the category of immigrant, because you identify as being of immigrant heritage. So I really don't care about your confusion of category errors. I don't care about what you think is and isn't bigoted or racist, because that's not actually the definition of racism, by the way. I mean, racism as is proper, arbitrary hatred of someone for the color of their skin. As a Christian, I think that's incorrect. I've never said anything different. But from people that call everything racist, people that said that, milk is a symbol of white supremacy, people that said talking about the grooming gangs is anti-Muslim racism, as we covered earlier. Yeah, I'm not going to take lectures on what is and isn't racist from you, because I think you're fundamentally bad faith. So anyway, continuing with the responses to Lucy's tweet, I'm going to talk about the Conservative Party for a moment here. So Tom Tugendhat was a nearly Conservative leader. I think it came down to the final 3, or might have been 4 last time around. Tom Tugendhat's basically a spook, right? He goes to all the Bilderberg meetings. He is obsessed with international law and foreign policy. And there's just something about those... It's the same with the Bush-era interventionist, right? Tom Tugendhat is just a neocon through and through. And he would happily have me conscripted to die in a ditch in Ukraine. So I've got no love lost for him. And he defends Nuzgani here by saying that Nuzgani has stood up for her community's interest for a decade. Which community? Defended Parliament's interests from the Speaker's chair for 18 months and been sanctioned by China and Russia for defending our country's interests from dictators. Okay, sanctioned by China and Russia. I don't think that if you haven't, at this point, been condemned by an Indian newspaper or sanctioned by Pakistan, that you are on the friend side of the friend-enemy distinction. If Indians aren't freaking out about you over Twitter in their droves, then I think you failed the test of friendship. Because you should be able to point out their ethno-politics in our respective countries. Their willingness to exploit permissive visa and asylum systems to gain a demographic beachhead by which they can then form a diaspora and then, send remittances back to their country, enriching us by siphoning off our hard-earned work through taxes back to India. Or, celebrating when Rishi Sunak gets installed as Prime Minister as an Indian sun rising over the empire, basically doing like a vindictive ethnic flex over the British, at our expense, yet again. So, cool, you've been sanctioned by China and Russia. I have no great affinity for China and Russia either. For probably different reasons to Tom Tugendhat, because he'd love nothing more than to see them become a liberal democracy that can just become another vessel for pride parades and having Pakistanis running the Russian government, because that's a symbol of progress or something for some reason. But I don't care if she's been sanctioned by that. She still does not represent us. She doesn't. She swore on the Quran in Urdu. Sorry. Blanket no. He says, she's been voted in 4 times by those who trust her in Sussex. Yes, in a very safe Conservative seat where you purposefully parachuted in ethnic minority candidates because David Cameron wanted the party to be more non-white. At some point, I can't believe I didn't get this up. Go and watch Michael Gove's speech from 2023 at the National Conservative Conference. He sat down with Madeline Grant, who is his co-host on The Spectator. By all accounts, Madeline Grant is really nice, by the way. So I'm not slagging off Madeline Grant at all. But I know for a fact that he wouldn't show up to the National Conservative Conference unless he had a sort of like ego-massaging softballed interview. And he was asked what were the greatest accomplishments of the Conservative government. And you'd expect him to say education, because that's what he was responsible for. That's what pretty much every Conservative minister has been coached to say were the achievements of the last government. But he didn't. He said 2 things. Number 1, he said universal credit. Now, universal credit, for anyone who's been following the budget, knows that this is going to be a benefits bill of like 400 billion in 5 years. Because of the level of welfare that is given out to people. We have like nearly 1 million young people under the age of 30 who are now NEETs, signed off on like mental health problems or something since COVID, and 1/4 of the working age population are out of work and on benefits. So the Conservatives ballooned the benefits bill, and there's apparently something good for Michael Gove. But the second answer was a lot more revealing. The second answer was both the intellectual and the superficial diversity of our cabinet and our parliament. Did you catch that? The intellectual diversity, which is hilarious because they're all liberals totally disconnected from everything that we care about. There's literally, again, like maybe 3 politicians in the entire... Well, no. Let's be fair. Nick Timothy, Jack Rankin, Katie Lamb, Suella Braverman, ironically, and Rupert Lowe. They're the only ones that care. So, not much diversity in thought there. Instead, it's the superficial diversity. Basically, more brown and black equals more good. Michael Gove, the longest serving cabinet member of the last government. Knighted, the Sherpa, the sensei of Kemi Badenoch, now running The Spectator. I wonder why he took it a little bit personally, I suppose, when I said that there shouldn't be any non-Indigenous Brits in government, given his protege would fit that bill. Anyway, so Tom says, Nuz needs no help from me to call out cretins, but I'll join her just the same. Again, dealing in insults. Sitting MP. Can't even justify why we should have foreigners ruling over us. I don't agree with any of the criteria here that she serves the public any better than if there were a native counterpart in her place. And instead he just insults Lucy. When Lucy makes a substantive point about the Constitution, about security, and about representation. Then you've got Tobias Ellwood, the former MP of Bournemouth, I think. Tobias Ellwood is also a spook. So, I don't know if anyone's heard of the 77th Brigade. The 77th Brigade is literally the keyboard warrior division of the military. So they sit there and use bot farms and anonymous accounts to counteract harmful narratives and misinformation online. They're basically the military's psychological warfare operations division. And Tobias Ellwood is a reserve in that division. I think the brigadier commander of that division was married. I don't think he is actually the commander anymore, but he's still married to Dame Caroline Dinenage. You might remember Caroline Dinenage from being the woman who sent letters out to GB News and Rumble and TikTok and Twitter demanding they deplatform Russell Brand in anticipation of the Online Safety Act being passed because of the Channel 4 documentary that made allegations of sexual impropriety against him. Now, I'm not going to comment about those allegations. They were made in a highly dubious fashion because one of the accusers now works for Channel 4. Okay, and there's no CCTV of it, there's no eyewitnesses at the time, all these things. Anyway. But the audacity of Dame Caroline Dinenage pushing the Online Safety Act as a censorship measure to then tell social media companies that they have to deplatform and demonetize a man on the basis of an unfounded allegation that has, as far as I know, has not had its day in court yet. I think he showed up to a hearing or something about it a little while ago, but the allegation alone was enough for a punishment. Her husband ran the 77th Brigade. So you see this sort of nested interest of people who are utterly odious. So Tobias Ellwood says, I was born in New York and I am a dual national. Should that have prevented me from being an MP? Don't tempt me. Seriously, don't tempt me. Dual national, yes. You should be prevented from being a dual national from being an MP. I think we should ban dual nationality entirely. Again, another thing that is going to make me very unpopular with certain sectors of the right, but we should. I agree with Liz on this, actually. Liz said this recently. We should ban dual nationals from every country. You should only have one nationality. That is the nation that you are loyal to. You shouldn't be able to just cut and run elsewhere. You shouldn't have a contingency plan for if your nation gets worse, especially if you're meant to be serving that nation, because at all times you have one foot out the door, mentally. And Tobias Ellwood was born in New York. Now, he has native British ancestry. I actually wouldn't... Well, okay. It's not that I wouldn't put the standard that you have to be born in the country to be an MP. I haven't decided yet. But if that was a standard, I am fine with it. Right? If that is a standard that gets brought forward, let's say Restore Britain makes a policy about this and says you have to be born in the country to be an MP. And that's a compromise that gets made, fine. I don't think that makes you indistinguishably British. I think you need to have British ancestry in order to be an MP. That is my position. But if the position is that you need to be born in the country to be an MP, and that excludes Tobias Ellwood, win-win. But if you notice, Lucy didn't actually say that. Her exact wording was, there should not be a single person, there was, born in Pakistan. Sorry, I thought she said from Pakistan, so I correct. So I'm actually harder line than Lucy is on this one. Or at least in the tweet that she initially expressed. I think she probably agrees with me. So then there's a Conservative councillor that just said, Lucy is a racist. No broadcaster should put this racist on TV to spread her despicable hatred. Conservative councillor. I think Carl made a video on this, and he was the one that pointed it out. Concerns about racism in the way that he's putting it across are a left-wing problem. We are not making a moral statement about the fact that she was born in Pakistan, that she's a Pakistani woman. I'm not saying that she is morally inferior for that. I am saying she's morally inferior for what she believes, because, Islam is morally inferior to Christianity. I think it's morally reprehensible, actually. And again, that's me saying this again, having met a few nice people who say they're Muslims. Like, Majid Nawaz been very polite to me, and I think... Let me know, actually, in the chat. I said to Majid that we might want to organise a sort of sit-down and a discussion, perhaps about Islam and all these sorts of issues, sometime next year if I can get a studio. So if that's something that would interest you guys, I'll try and put it together. The same with... Rakib Hassan. Sorry, I was thinking the other one that was used to follow Nigel around. Rakib Hassan, again, Muslim guy. I interviewed him about his book before. I disagree with him on plenty of things, but he's also... he recognises that the English are a distinct ethnic group and believes they should remain the majority and run their own country. So, nice chap. That doesn't mean that their religion is correct, and that doesn't mean the vast majority of Muslims in any country are nice chaps either. The I know a nice guy, therefore they all must be nice fallacy, utterly ruining politics. Anyway, I can see a few people saying, yes, please do the Majid thing. Happy to ask. Okay, so we'll try and set that up. Anyway, none of this is a racist concern. It's just noticing the differences between peoples and saying that the people who are inextricable from the country, after whom the country is named, should be in possession of their own country. And they're not in possession of their own country if they don't have access to the halls of power. Not just that they proactively excluded by DEI shortlists, but they're not represented in Parliament because you've got Pakistanis and Bangladeshis and Indians and various other ethnicities all shouting for their own in-group interests, and the British people and their interests are not being made present. Not by pretty much any of the members of Parliament, but especially by the members who are foreign. And I'm sorry, I'm just not backing down from this. Like, I'm saying all of this with my chest. I don't care who's going to clutch pearls. Clip it all you like. I will stand behind everything I've said here today. Totally fine. Another Conservative MP who actually follows me, which is weird. Like, do you not know what I think at this point? Again, I don't know this guy. He could well be nice. But he says, Nuz is a fantastic colleague and worked hard to get to where she is. Well, sorry, but like, she's the beneficiary of a pro-diversity, so anti-white, selection process. So I don't care how hard you think she's worked. The natives have been excluded from their own politics to astroturf women like her. I don't think that's correct. He says, I'm proud my party and parliamentary colleagues of all parties aren't this dumb or prejudiced. Okay. Dumb is just an insult to Lucy, and she's not dumb. I know Lucy. She's intelligent. Prejudiced. I think prejudice is a good thing. Prejudice is a tool. Now, prejudice is like a hammer. If you use it to hammer in nails, good. If you use it to hammer in the skulls of babies, bad. Though perhaps not according to Stella Creasy, given her abortion policy. But, prejudice, I am prejudiced against Muslim MPs, or Hindu MPs. I'm prejudiced against MPs from India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, all lobbying to import their co-ethnics into my country. I'm prejudiced against all of that. Do you know why? I think they're all bad things. I'm against bad things. I'm for good things, it turns out. It turns out all of us can say that we're against bad things and for good things. Do you know what you're prejudiced against, Paul? People that you call racist. So you yourself are prejudiced. You are playing friend-enemy politics. You're just draping the shroud of liberal neutrality over it. And by marginalising Lucy's position as prejudiced, racist, beyond the pale, unacceptable, dumb, then you're positioning yourself as the only legitimate authority, the only acceptable domain of politics. And I'm sorry, we just don't agree that that domain has delivered good things, actually. Look at the country. Has the country and its governance been improved by more foreign MPs? Or has it been made worse? Made measurably worse by those that imported millions of unwanted immigrants into our country because they identified themselves as immigrants or the sons and daughters of immigrants, or, as Hamza Yusuf said, a son of the soil of Pakistan. Turns out everyone's a blood and soil nationalist for somewhere that they actually like. Here are more Conservatives. Chris Clarkson, who is a Tory MP, whose bio is written in Greek. Sorry, Stelios. And again, in terms of immigrants we actually like and would like to keep here, like, I don't want to banish Stelios. He's an absolute gentleman, came to my wedding, makes good content. Even if he's still trying to rescue liberalism. Gotta let it go, man. I love you. Very intelligent. Gotta let it go. Just let it sail off into the distance. He says, I was born in Germany, as Carl pointed out, probably on an English military base, and I've spent about 13 years in various elected public offices. I served under a PM born in the USA and was beaten at the last election by a candidate born in Italy. We're all British and we will love this country. This is a completely moronic comment. Again, making a moral declarative statement that we're all British, untrue. You might be by legal designation, but you have gradations of loyalty and you do not share the ancestry of this place if you're Nuzgani. He says she's completely moronic. It's just an insult. I served under a PM born in the USA. He's talking about Boris Johnson. Now, Boris Johnson is part Turkish. But if you're telling me that we should have a standard that should have prevented Boris Johnson from becoming Prime Minister and someone else should have ran against Jeremy Corbyn instead, you know, on reflection, I think I'll take that bargain. I think I'll not have the Boris wave if we didn't have Priti Patel and Kemi Badenoch and Sajid Javid and Boris Johnson. I think you're really selling it to me. Oh, and Rishi Sunak, by the way. And then this guy clearly demonstrates his love for Britain with his Greek bio and his Ukrainian-Israeli flag in his name. I'm sorry, if you have another country's flag in your name, I might think you have divided loyalties. Now, I don't know why he's obsessed with standing for foreign countries. He may genuinely have family members, he may have a deep affinity with these countries, whatever. But as an MP, you were elected to represent the British public. You were not elected to represent Israel or Ukraine. So, I'm glad you lost your seat, even if it was to, presumably, a Labour MP. Or perhaps it was a Lib Dem. I mean, frankly, you can't tell the difference. So I'm glad you lost your seat, because if you can't tell the difference between a native Brit and Nuzgani, and if you have your attention and loyalties divided between different countries, and if you don't even like your own language enough to have your bio be in English, then I'm sorry, you're totally inadequate as a public servant. Now you're probably wondering, why am I going for all these Tory no-names? Oh, I'll get to it. So this is David Lidington, former MP, and was basically Theresa May's de facto Deputy Prime Minister. He was the Minister for the Cabinet Office, a fairly powerful position, liaising with the top civil servant. And again, he's saying that this is bigotry and outright racism advocated by Lucy White. Again, absolutely nothing. British identity rests on shared civic values. No, it doesn't. What civic values did I share with Henry VIII? Hengist and Horsa. Winston Churchill, for that matter. Do you think Winston Churchill would like Nuzgani to be the Speaker of the Commons? I happen to remember him proposing a Keep Britain White slogan in the 50s. Perhaps all of the Churchill was responsible for post-war migration rhetoric wasn't warranted. So the idea that British identity is purely a construction of shared civic values means that you're going to retroactively deprive membership of Britain's fantastic national story from our ancestors and its key figures and grant it to Nuzgani, born in Pakistan, a Pakistani Muslim, instead. Do you realise how absurd you sound? Do you realise why people don't want the Conservative Party, actually? Because you're telling them obvious lies. You're like trying to uphold a moral order that was led to completely preventable atrocities like the Pakistani grooming gangs, and nothing was done because of the exact accusations that you're levelling at Lucy now, the bigotry and outright racism of, you know, discussing the grooming gangs and the fact that they're Pakistani Muslim. So, nobody is listening to you on this. Nobody's listening to the Conservative Party. Nobody is listening to figures like this. This is the most absurd one. Matthew Gordon Banks saying this is Nazism. Matthew Gordon Banks was a Conservative MP under John Major, and then obviously got wiped out by the Blair election. And the reason I'm saying all this is because this is the id of the Conservative Party as it stands. The Conservative Party, and the reason they elected Kemi Badenoch, who identifies as Yoruba Nigerian, as their leader, the reason that Charles Moore... Oh, no, hang on, I've got to give this up. Charles Moore is like one of our favourite pinatas over on this channel, isn't he? He is like the avatar of out-of-touch boomer. Reminder, he's the chairman at The Spectator. His son is a Nepo baby that's employed by The Spectator. He still writes to The Telegraph. He keeps writing hit pieces on the woke right and that. I'm not even going to get this article, like, opened. We don't even need to read it. But this was Charles Moore's latest article. Feminism is coming. Oh, it isn't good enough that she was... he said, what did he say? Seeing a black woman lead the oldest political party in history will be a sight for sore eyes. It's not enough. He wants chemi-feminism. Fuck off. Seriously, retire. You have nothing to offer. Pathetic. So, the reason that the Conservatives are tanking is because of this mentality, because this represents nobody. This just makes old boomers who don't care about the country they're leaving behind feel good about signalling their progressive platitudes and not being called mean, racist, or, as he said, uncivilized by their opponents by actually doing something about mass migration, demographic displacement, white flight, and the dilapidation of our culture and economy. They can instead continue to say just how progressive they are. But, you know, they're not as radically progressive. They just don't want to go as fast as their opponents. They're just safely driving the speed limit. But instead, they practice a no enemies to life strategy and continue calling people like Lucy a Nazi. Do you know who else they call Nazis? Reform. Now, this is the tweet from Kevin Hollinrake, UK. Right, sorry, Kevin Hollinrake MP, UK spelled Y-O-O-K-A-Y. So he responded to Nigel Farage putting out a badge that he ended up emblazing on, of all things, a football t-shirt, because obviously that's the most important thing right now when we're getting demographically erased, Nigel, is for you to sell football jerseys. The sort of complacency you can have when you are the stand-in vote for an actual remigration party, and you're just in the lead by double the polling of your next closest rival because every other party is utterly incompetent and treacherous. Pretty astounding. So he can just sort of coast to victory. Thank you for the super chat, by the way. Remember, if you are going to super chat, at least like make your money's worth and ask me a question or insult me or something. Like, I feel bad just taking people's money when they just send me a sticker or like no message. Please do actually say something. Like, if you are going to send a super chat in, you know, bend my rather large ears. God gave me them to listen for a reason. Anyway, The reason I'm talking about this is Kevin Hollinrake replied to this innocuous badge, this act of frankly total populism. You know, it's like when Trump was selling like NFTs of himself in the run up to the election, and everyone was going, "Please just make an announcement on immigration." The Biden administration are sending the Department of Justice to parent school board meetings. The FBI are infiltrating churches. Pro-life activists are being arrested. Their grandmothers. Like, please, for the love of God, do something other than sell Trump coin. And, well, Kevin Hollinrake has responded to this fairly innocuous act of sloppyism by Nigel Farage with the following Wikipedia link. The Golden Party Badge. He doubled down on it, by the way. So he's literally just calling Farage and Reform Nazis. This is the Conservatives. Still. So keep this all in mind. Keep this all in mind. Because we're going to get onto the Conservatives in a moment. Because they play a key part in the question of representation. Anyway, so look, Lucy responded to a lot of these smears. She notes that she sparked some fiery debate. She said overwhelmingly people are in agreement with me, which is true on X. And if you put this to people over time, that, you know, should there be people born abroad serving as MPs in Parliament, should there be non-natives, like, with political power over you, the majority of the country will just go, no, it's our country. So, she says, starting with Boris Johnson, that Boris is ethnically white British, he has a Turkish great-grandfather, Crimea River, and regardless of where he was born in the world, Boris would have been born, he would always remain white British. So she holds the consistent position that it should be based on ethnicity, not just on birthplace. Says, there should not be a single Pakistani in the UK House of Commons, and here's why. Pakistanis in the UK are by far the most problematic foreign group. I would also say Indians. Shall I remind you why? Pakistani grooming gangs, terror attacks, 7/7 bombings, halal meat, misogyny, first cousin marriage, and birth defects. So she lists off all their various sins. Correct. Calls to introduce blasphemy laws. Calls to build an international airport in Mirpur. I forgot about that. The guy who also called for a blasphemy law was lobbying for a new airport to be established in the exact region that the Pakistani grooming gangs have come from. Spread of mosques, sectarian voting blocks, list goes on and on. So she's crafted this tweet excellently. As she said, Aristotle said democracy is possible only within homogenous ethnic groups. I mean, that's sort of a paraphrase. Though he did say something about, you know, tyrants supping with foreigners rather than natives, because foreigners don't represent a threat, and that's a part of the tyrant's playbook. But look, I'll let her get away with paraphrasing Aristotle, because at least she's actually like trying to quote Aristotle. We've seen a Muslim sectarian voting bloc across the UK. Naz Shah in Bradford West, Ayub Khan in Birmingham Perry Bar. Nuz Ghani is praised as the first Muslim woman elected as a Tory MP. That's a mark against the Tory party. And she mentions David Cameron's A-list to bring in ethnic minorities. So Nuz Ghani has been artificially astroturfed by David Cameron, so she's not actually representative. She says, some argue that Nuz Ghani does a good job as speaker. Sure, I'm not saying she doesn't. But this is not an excuse to demographically replace our own people. We've seen the proportion of the white population across England and Wales decrease from 94% in 1991, I would say 99.9% in 1948, to 74% in 2021. It's actually much lower. In select areas as well, especially London, where Parliament is headquartered. Trust me, it's a lot lower now after the Boris wave. DEI policies in any country are wrong because they take job opportunities away from the natives. The Overton window has shifted and people are awake. I encourage you to follow Lucy, but basically, this opinion is just reasonable. It's breaking through. And so it doesn't matter how many campaigns the likes of Conservative MPs, or Stella Creasy, or Stop Funding Hate, or even if GB News caved to pressure on this and blacklist me. I've already recorded another interview, by the way, that's waiting to go out with Stephen Edgington. I did say that, you know, David Lammy doesn't understand British traditions, considering he considers himself a Caribbean person. Otherwise, if he really was English, which he can't be, would he be paying reparations to himself? So we'll see if they put that interview out. I hope they do. I hope they don't back down and, you know, seek to appease their enemies and isolate their friends. But even if they did cancel that, it doesn't make me want to change my mind. I'm not going to go, oh, I should stay silent on a matter of principle so I can get a GB News interview. Like, GB News only exists to spread the message. It doesn't exist to, like, spread my career. There are some people who think that the message should be, they should have a monopoly on certain topics and become the only credible person on that topic and therefore make their entire career off that topic and get very precious about it. Even some of the most sensitive topics, like immigration and the crimes that are associated with them. I actually don't care. I like the fact that more people are just saying things with credibility. I don't like people just like low IQ spurging and making me look non-credible. You know what? I'll use an example of this. So Nick Fuentes, I think it was the other day, I saw a clip of him going around where he was just condemning the likes of Ian Carroll and Candace Owens for their obviously discredited theories about Charlie Kirk's murder. It seems, I don't want to prejudice anything, that Charlie Kirk's murderer is Tyler Robinson. I mean, all the chat logs that Jack Posobiec has obtained, the photos of their disgusting flat, his obsession with transgenderism and gay sex, and believing that Kirk was a bigot, and so allegedly shot him while he was answering a question about transgender violence. Meanwhile, Ian Carroll, who, tweeted a few days before Kirk was killed that Charlie Kirk was in the pay of the same Jews that killed Jesus, is suddenly of the belief that Charlie Kirk was about to flip on Israel, and so Israel assassinated him. And Candace Owens think there was a conspiracy with men in maroon uniforms, the intelligence agencies, the French Foreign Legion, who also want to kill her, Brigitte Macron, the MK-Ultra program, the Stanford Prison Experiment, the Israeli government, of course, and the Egyptians. And Nick just said, basically, you're all retarded, and you're going to look really foolish in about a year's time when it all comes out that this is not the case. And he's not just going to cave to pressure just because there's some audience crossover there. And you know what? Again, you might not agree with Nick on everything. Respect. Major respect for standing on principle. That's what I've always done. This is why I actually pissed off certain segments of the Lotus Eaters audience when I was there, right from the very off when I said porn was bad. I have always just spoken my mind. I am not going to back down because I'm promised opportunities or because I think certain people in the space won't like me. Trust me, I've already pissed off certain people in the space. I've been blacklisted from outlets before, and then I've come back through sheer force of will. I will be editor of The Spectator one day, Michael. I'm trying to manifest it. If you just stick a consistent line, speak what you believe to be true, based on evidence and principle, and you just consistently go at it, and don't allow yourself to be waylaid or self-censor with either the vague promise or the provision of opportunities, of money, of a safe seat in Parliament, of being an additional puzzle piece in the grand image of containment, then eventually you just make it so that your issue is unavoidable and they have to confront you. And I think this is just what we're doing. Like, sorry, you're not going to be able to avoid this if all the MPs are freaking out about it because they know that their entire privileged existence, ignoring our concerns, is contingent on the fact that foreigners can continue representing us in Parliament despite not actually representing our concerns. Then, yeah, sorry, I'm going to challenge that. I don't really care how offended you are, actually. Lucy did another response too. And this is where she got hit pieces in The Guardian and the Daily Mail, so, again, solidarity with me. I got the National. She got the Guardian and the Daily Mail? Oh, man. So envious. But this is where she believes that she might have been cancelled by Talk and GB. I don't think she's been booked since. I think she's in America at the moment, but I don't think she's been asked back since. Also, this article was written by Ben Quinn, who came up to me at an event for the Centre for Social Justice, was being, very patronising and probing in a very feminine way. Like, he was asking me what my favourite fiction book was, and he was like, well, I presume you have read fiction recently. And he'd asked me this completely off-the-cuff question. I was like, what was the last fiction book I read? I think it was The Lathe of Heaven at the time by Ursula Le Guin. I think I'd re-listened to it. But I was thinking, I just said to him, oh yeah, well, some of my favourite books are sort of classics like, Catcher in the Rye or Great Gatsby. And I was just sort of listing off a few books. And he was like, oh, what you read in secondary school? I was like, okay, if you're not going to be sincere, just don't talk to me, man. Like, I hate these bitchy fucking status games that people play and this cattiness. Just like, no, I'm not going to engage with you then. I'm going to treat you as well as I can the first time I meet you, and the moment you show me the slightest bit of insincerity or pettiness, then I'm just going to cut you adrift. And so these people just exist to take, reputation pot shots and try and get you cancelled and ostracized for saying obviously sensible things. And I just don't think any of the outlets should back down, because what Lucy's saying is correct. It's fair. She hasn't actually been rude about it. She's been perfectly consistent and erudite, and she's a far better commentator than most of the people at GB News platforms. So, in the last little while, it has been proven as to why we shouldn't have foreign MPs in our parliament. Here's a couple more examples. Do you hear about Tulip Siddiq? Her aunt was the leader of Bangladesh, who's now been sentenced to death for corruption and like extrajudicial killings. And apparently she had something about procuring property in Bangladesh, using privileges that her aunt had accrued by being the leader of the country. Tulip Siddiqui had something like leaflets for her aunt's campaign in her house. Here it is. Prosecutors said she obtained 3 plots of land in the outskirts of the capital Dhaka for her mother, Sheikh Rahana, Azmina Siddiqui Raponti, her sister, and Radwan Mujib Siddiq, her brother. So, yeah. In addition to the prison term, Siddiq was fined 100,000 taka, £620, and will be sentenced to a further 6 months imprisonment if she fails to pay. And this is in Bangladesh. So we've now got Bangladeshis being sentenced to prison in Bangladesh for their family ties to the Bangladeshi government while serving in the Labour government. Oh, and by the way, she was Keir Starmer's anti-corruption minister. Brilliant. And at the same time as this as well, speaking of Bangladeshis, so Tower Hamlets has been taken over as a Bangladeshi slum. You've seen Whitechapel, right? So there's been a bunch of councillors in Tower Hamlets running to be on the London Borough Council for Tower Hamlets. They're also trying to be MPs in Bangladesh, and they're running for like a progressive party in London while running for the Bangladeshi Nationalist Party in Bangladesh. The same thing happened for Reform, by the way. There was a Reform UK council candidate who had previously run as a Bangladeshi Nationalist Party candidate in Bangladesh, then migrated to the UK and then joined Reform. So, yeah. Sorry. I'm going to click this. This is totally off script, by the way. I've just seen this headline. What's the bet that he's going to say Shabana Mahmood? Who's the person that Michael Gove thinks that he should fear most? Where is it? Angela Rayner, we're streeting. No, Angela Rayner, really? Okay, I'm shocked. Anyway, I was interested. Totally sidetracked. I'm basically like Hammy from Over the Hedge. Anyway, so I want to just conclude this bit before I go on to how we actually get our authentic representation, and then I'll answer some super chats, because I wasn't even intending this to be 2 hours, but you guys get a lot of content out of me. I hope that you actually enjoy it. So, you know what the mark of a good man is? It's the willingness to put power aside in order to improve your country. And Ben Habib is not an MP. He's tried to be an MP a few times, and actually, Ben would make a good MP. Now, Ben's mother is an English Christian. I don't know if she's still alive, actually. His father is Pakistani. And Ben, I think, was born in Pakistan, but he is half English. And so, depending on what the standard is, if it's Lucy's standard that, you can't be born abroad, then he would be excluded. If it's the standard of you have to have English ancestry, then he would be included. But Ben is willing to say that he is willing to abide by Lucy's standard that nobody born outside of Britain and without native ancestry should be an MP. And again, Ben specifically, no one born in Pakistan should be an MP, no Pakistani should be an MP. Ben wrote, it would be entirely reasonable for MPs to be required to be born in the UK. That wouldn't be racist in any way whatsoever. Only US citizens born in the US are allowed to be president. That's not racist. A similar restriction could be entirely reasonably be required for MPs. The UK has been subjected to mass migration and a dramatic change in its demography in a very short time. Any sane-minded individual would be concerned by these dramatic changes and would not wish to curtail them. Our leaders have not protected the UK's constitution and culture. They've promoted multiculturalism. Coupled with mass migration, this has resulted in great damage to just about every aspect of life in Britain. The British people have been badly bruised by this negligence. They are pleading to be protected. Their pleadings are being ignored. Their bruises are getting ever more serious. Unless those that govern us respond to the reasonable demands of us concerned British citizens, their demands will become ever more extreme. Like White, I want our constitution and culture restored. Her advocacy in favour of MPs being born in Britain is yet another cry for protection, and I was born in Pakistan. Of course, there are people that born abroad that love the UK, love its language, history and culture. I am one of them. They would be good guardians of the UK, but the difficulty now is in determining a mechanism to ensure anti-British sentiment does not continue to embed itself in our institutions and governing structures. Perhaps a blunt instrument, but the sentiment requiring MPs be born in the UK is understandable. Patriot. Absolute patriot. But Ben has always been a very good man, very generous. Despite his personal spat with Nigel giving some people the opposite impression, he is actually quite humble. He's always been very polite and supportive to me, as has his team. His son's a really nice guy as well. Like, good man. And the fact that he is willing to say that he would put aside his own personal ambition, because Advance UK has just become a registered political party, by the way, as of today. And look, whether or not it's going to get anywhere, maybe we can discuss that in a moment before I address Super Chat questions. But the fact that he's willing to put his political future aside to support a motion that would exclude him from being an MP for the good of the country, admirable. Truly admirable. So, good man. And Lucy said, "Thank you, Ben. I thoroughly appreciate your productive, engaging comments. What you say is correct and I stand by this. We cannot be silenced or cancelled for stating obvious truths." And again, he reaffirms his respect for Lucy and his willingness to uphold the standard. Very good. Good man. So, okay. Ben Habib is not an MP. Unless he is magically elected in a by-election, he will not be an MP and therefore not eligible to be Prime Minister at the next election, and if we adopt this standard, which I think we should, he would be excluded anyway. Unfortunate. Perhaps in peacetime we would make another exception. Perhaps we could make an exception on the grounds that he's half English. I think that would be fair. But let's say the future is not Ben Habib. Let's say that the future is Reform UK. Well, as we've discussed before, it seems like Reform UK is just a vehicle not to get Nigel Farage elected per se, but to make Zia Yusuf Prime Minister. It's why he's everywhere, right? It's why Paul Marshall introduced him to Nigel Farage. It's why, seemingly, Nigel Farage allowed him to become the co-director of Reform UK after just a £200,000 donation. I mean, they've just got 9 million quid in the last few days. Are they going to make that guy the new party chairman instead? And then, after, he calls the police on Rupert Lowe over completely bogus charges, makes a massive PR headache, has it so that multiple loyal local branches are cut free. He estranges people like Charlie Downs, banning him from setting up a reform youth movement, and instead has a bunch of, I'm sure, well-meaning and polite people set one up instead, and you couldn't pick them out of a lineup, though. They've got no charisma and no staying power. They're hardly the next Charlie Kirk, are they? And then Zia Yusuf quits in a huff after insulting Sarah Pochin's intelligence about the burqa ban, and then basically, like, George Costanza comes back to work the next day with a promotion. So, Reform UK doesn't exist to get Nigel Farage elected. Reform UK exists to make Zia Yusuf the first Muslim Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Why? No idea. But note that Paul Marshall, Michael Gove, and their cohort are obsessed with being led by a minority. Rishi Sunak making Kemi Badenoch the leader of the Conservative Party. Michael Gove constantly glazing Shabana Mahmood whenever given the opportunity and saying that she could be the next Labour leader. And then Zia Yusuf being in charge of Reform UK. Are we represented by any of this? I would say no. I don't think any of this represents us. And so, who would represent us instead? Here's where, in the inner sanctum, the audience has shrank by about 100 live viewers now. So I think, like, we've weeded out the 100 that doesn't have the attention span of the patriots required to get things done. It's just you and me now, chat. So, like, listen in. I'm talking directly to you. Let's engage in a bit of political strategizing. Who's the one person that could do it? Who's in Parliament? And whether or not they're proximate to power. Who's the one person that represents our interests? Don't you dare say me, because I never want to be an MP. Do you think I would be talking on this live stream and, like, all of my YouTube videos if I had a political career in mind? Do you think I would be able to keep a party whip for 5 minutes? Maybe if Lucy was the head of the parliamentary standards. Maybe I'd be able to sit on the green benches. But I'm not going to be an MP, guys. It's fine. I've already settled my fate, by the way. I said I'll either take, like, a political appointment if a sufficiently courageous government were to, stick me in charge of the Home Office and have me fire everyone personally. Or I would become editor of The Spectator. I've seen someone just send a super chat in. Are you a private schoolboy? I'm not. I went to a C of E primary school, which was dreadful, and then I went to a kind of rough grammar school. So I passed the 11 plus, but no, never private school. Again, my dad's a plumber, my mum's a teacher. Despite my occasional enunciation, it's because I was a really nerdy and quite introverted kid, and so I spent a lot of time quietly reading, so I've developed basically an internal reading voice that has now become my external voice. Like, I don't actually sound like any of my family. My sister sounds like she's from Essex. My grandparents and my parents sound like they're from, like, there's like a twang of Cockney there. So maybe it comes out when I used to drink and get a bit rowdy. Anyway, completely derailed. So, who is the person that represents us? And it's not me. Well, Find Out Now did a bit of polling in the last week, and I found this interesting. 11% of people would consider voting for a party led by Rupert Lowe, including 43% of Reform voters. Now, Rupert Lowe has gone from, what was it, like 6% name recognition when he got defenestrated by Zia Youssef and Reform, to now being overwhelmingly, by a massive margin, the most popular and engaged with MP across social media. His interviews do gangbusters. His Twitter has fantastic impressions. And now, just without a party, purely hypothetically, without saying that, you know, these are the talent he could attract. 4 years, prospectively, out from a general election. With no infrastructure around him, Rupert Lowe is polling at 10%. 10%. Guys, that's what the Labour Party's almost on. That's almost what the Conservatives are on. Rupert Lowe is basically polling neck and neck with the 4 other parties that are nipping at the Reform's heels. Because Reform's on, what, like 32%, I think, at the latest poll? Let me get this up, actually. So, Stats for Lefties has broken this down recently. Here we go. Most recent poll. Okay, so there's Liverpool. Dear Lord. Where's the general election poll? Well, here's Great Yarmouth. Here's very important, actually. Rupert Lowe has launched his own independent party called Great Yarmouth First. And immediately, they're on 44%. They've taken 19% of the Reform vote. So, Rupert Lowe's local election party, just off the back of it being Rupert Lowe and being a good local MP, running away with it. He's going to dominate the council. So, very interesting. But the most recent general election polling, here we go. Labour dropped to 14%. This is from Find Out Now, from the same polling agency. And again, Find Out Now, they use mainly online polling, so you can quibble with their methodology. They didn't get the last general election quite right. They got a slight margin off. I think they underestimated the Conservative vote, because they underestimated the number of people, like the sort of boomers who aren't online, who would turn out on the day and just impulsively vote Conservative because they've always voted Conservative. But Reform are on 31%. The Conservatives have gained 2%. They're on 20%. The Greens are now on 18%. They've been floating around 15%. Labour on 14%. Lib Dems are on 11%. Other parties are on 6% combined. Those are the sort of independent parties. Independent Muslim candidates that you'll get more of, and they'll unseat people like Shabana Mahmood and Jess Phillips and Wes Streeting. Rupert Lowe is on 11% on his own, without a party, without any realistic prospect of becoming Prime Minister 4 years out from a general election. He's neck and neck with the Lib Dems. Now, in a first-past-the-post system, general popularity doesn't mean all that much, of course, because Reform got more votes than the Liberal Democrats, but they got 5 MPs at the time, and the Liberal Democrats got 73 seats, because they're very concentrated support base. But could this be a significant enough threat, if he is threatening to take away 43% of Reform's vote, to at least force Reform to be a bit more robust? Well, I think it's worth having someone nip at their heels with a corrective measure. I mean, at the moment, we've got this battle in America, right, for MAGA, saying that the Trump administration aren't doing everything that people want. And look, speaking as an Englishman purely selfishly, the State Department's doing fantastic things. I've got even more to cover next week. You guys have been liking the State Department coverage, so I'm going to focus on that. Also, let me know, by the way, if you prefer live streams or short videos, because the short videos actually take longer to make, because I've got to do edits, and I've got to process and export it and upload it. Whereas the live streams, I mean, I think the format works pretty well. It's just usually it gets fewer views, and YouTube doesn't really advantage it in the algorithm, so I've been mixing it up a little bit. But I do actually prefer the live streams. Anyway, let me know what you think. Comments or live chat. Anyway. Where was I? Yes, Trump administration. So, the administration hasn't been doing everything that people want. Like, the enforced deportations have plateaued somewhat, even though the self-deportations are in the numbers of millions. Yes, they've got net emigration, but also there's been interventions in Iran, which caused division in the base, even if it looks ultimately like a successful get in, get out, don't get involved with boots on the ground job, even though I think the Israelis are really pushing for a regime change, and I don't think there's much appetite, well, from Trump at least. I mean, you remember his frustration saying both countries don't know what the fuck they're doing? I think that was sincere. There seems to be this desire to get embroiled in a conflict with Venezuela because Marco Rubio, as a Cuban, really hates Latin American communism, but perhaps Marco Rubio wants a few more wins on his record and ingratiating himself with the base so that he can either challenge Vance as presidential nominee or run on a combined ticket with Vance, basically be a shoo-in, or at least be coronated by Donald Trump. People are frustrated by the Epstein files. People don't like that Trump had excused H-1Bs and said they need 600,000 Chinese students and we're going to staple green cards to diplomas, like all of these things, right? People are frustrated, even though Trump's done some very good things. What's happening now with MAGA, with the internal MAGA civil war, using Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson as a proxy against J.D. Vance, using the term Groiper to be a smear. And by the way, it is a smear because you remember they tried to say Tyler Robinson was a Groiper until it came out that he had a furry boyfriend, which I know some people will say won't preclude him from being a Groiper. Dear me. Anyway, this op is basically battling for who gets to contain and control the trajectory of the right in the future. And so people are having these proxy wars now to define what MAGA is while they're still in power, so that going into 2028, when the midterms are slightly less consequential, for the next few years of governance, Trump does everything he can before he leaves office, makes good on his promises. And I think we've got a few years now, till the next election, where reform look to be inevitably victorious, to force reform to get into shape, or to at least provide ourselves with a viable alternative if reform seem insistent on populating their party with yesterday's conservatives, who still think like Kevin Hollenrake and call that party Nazis. We just had a conservative shadow bench peer defect to reform today. Okay, are they just a refugee camp for the Tories now? And if they're insistent on pushing Zia Yusuf down our throats, which I don't like. So, could we ensure that Rupert Lowe has some star power? Well, I think Rupert resonates, his message resonates. I mean, his address in Parliament recently about illegal migration, not just about the defending speech and Lucy Connolly, but his speech in Parliament about, I don't care. The British people are bored. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care should be the mentality that all of our politicians have, that we should all have. It's a mentality that I have. It's a mentality that Lucy has. We should just be saying what we believe and know to be true. The fact that he's willing to say that, and I know Rupert, he really doesn't care. The fact that he's willing to say that means, even if he's far from the job, he's certainly the man for the job. And so the most revealing part of this was his interview with Tucker Carlson. Now, some of you may have watched this. Look at him grinning like the Cheshire Cat. Rupert could have gone harder, don't get me wrong. He could have gone a lot firmer on the cultural aspects of migration, but Rupert is a businessman. He has a comprehensive knowledge of the economy. That's why he's on the Public Accounts Committee, currently torching Antonia Romeo, who, as he said, is a queen of woke. I mean, Steve Edgington has so many stories about her time in the civil service, you know, it raises your eyebrows clean off your face. But this is very symbolic, and there are people in the space, people that I've known and respected, who were disparaging this, saying this was a bad idea. No. Right. You don't need to agree with everything Tucker says. I don't agree with everything Tucker says. I think his comments about Pakistani taxi drivers and Bangladeshis were misguided, to say the least. I think, you know, sitting down with George Stephanopoulos' sister and presenting her as a sort of neutral nun from Bethlehem, bad idea. And I don't think we can make co-belligerence with Islam just because they're against trans and Zionism. However, I like Tucker's show. So, those criticisms aside, I enjoy Tucker's interviews. I've got criticisms about all sorts of people I watch. Like I said earlier that I find Milo entertaining, but I think he's wrong about Charlie Kirk. I find Nick very entertaining. I think he's incorrect about Islam, for example. And he's been unduly disparaging about people that I like John Doyle and Patrick Casey. It'd be nice if they all made up, you know. However, all of that aside, all of that fucking high school drama stuff aside, this is powerful. The optics of this are powerful because Farage turned it down. Farage was too risk averse. Farage was asked by Tucker and he said no. And Tucker hasn't said that, but I know that's true. And Farage didn't want to do it because of the controversy about Fuentes. Because he didn't know where the Trump administration lined up, because he didn't want to get called all sorts of names. Because he's already getting called names by things that he allegedly said as a kid. I mean, we've all made edgy jokes, who cares? But I don't think Farage is handling it all that well, and they're trying to make a massive media storm out of it. I mean, BBC Newsnight have just convened another special about whether or not Farage said some insults to black and Jewish classmates when he was 15. I would have just turned around at a press conference and said, oh, the BBC, you know that one that hired Jimmy Savile and Hugh Edwards for ages? You've got a habit of hiring paedophiles. Sorry, I'm not going to take moral lectures from you. Boom. Repudiated. Never legitimate their framework. Rupert doesn't care. Rupert doesn't care what they call him. Remember when Emily Maitlis tried to ambush him as a racist? He just said, no, don't care. I just want to deport Pakistani rapists. Good. Rupert doesn't care what you're going to call him for sitting down with Tucker. He knows this is a large platform. He knows that Americans are very concerned about free speech in the UK and mass migration. And he knows that it's not about his future. It's not about the hypothetical lucrative opportunities that he can get by shutting up and staying silent. This is why he was outspoken about Reform's inability to attract talent, and this is why he was defenestrated for that mild criticism. This is why actually I think Suella got kicked out of her position in the Conservative Party, because she wasn't willing to keep her head down and just talk the party line. She actually wanted to get things done. This is why Liz got kicked out as Prime Minister. This is why lots of the best people that I know in politics have been blacklisted from all sorts of organizations and various positions and outlets. Like, I won't speak for them on all counts, but Lewis Brackpool, Stephen Edgington, Charlie Downs, Harrison Pitt, list not limited to those guys, but they are some of my closest friends, have all been banned or slandered by one outlet or another. And the reason is they won't play ball. They won't stay quiet on certain issues that might offend someone or that someone has a vested interest in, just to not be called names or, get a column in Unheard or get a safe seat in the Tory party. They don't care. I don't care. Rupert doesn't care. And not caring is what's made him the most popular MP on social media. Not caring is why he took this interview from Tucker to make it about the issues, not about propelling himself safely into a career in Parliament where he can claim as many expenses as he wants, and eventually if he becomes PM he's got permanent private security and a quicker passport queue wherever he lands going through the airport, which is what Farage wants, being frank. Here's a story. I once ran into Farage on a bus that was transferring us from the departure steps to the passport queue in Washington Dulles. It was for CPAC, and I just said, "You going to CPAC?" And he was like, "Yeah." I could tell he was tired from the flight. And I was just thinking, he doesn't enjoy that. He doesn't enjoy the fact that he doesn't know who's around. It could be a security risk. He might get recognised. He might have someone hurl abuse at him or ask for a photo. He's just come off a flight. What he wants is nothing more than not to pay for his security anymore, to have a police security detail funded by the state, to go through the fast queue and private security in airports, to get the nice lounges in Heathrow. He wants all of that. Right? And I've travelled with Liz before, so I know that's what they get, right? He wants that. And so he could well step down in 2 years as Prime Minister and go, well, I've done my bit, but someone younger and more attractive has come along, as he keeps promising, and because there's no internal election process in Reform, because it's a dictatorship, and look, I'm actually in favour of that party mechanism. I'm Curtis Yarvin about this. If the man leading is incompetent, I'm happy for that man to be the executive, to be the CEO, to be the de facto king on these things. But if he makes poor judgments, like, making Zia Yusuf co-owner of the party, then I would then question the judgment on who he would coronate as his successor, and we just get Zia Yusuf even though nobody voted for him. He's already said, by the way, that he wants to fill the cabinet with people who aren't MPs. Now, again, that would be sensible if you're picking the right people. And judging by, their prison expert who said we should have trans men in women's prisons, judging by David Bull being the party chairman, judging by Richard Tice possibly being the Chancellor, dear Lord, not making the most prudent selections. Whereas Rupert Lowe, what talent has he cultivated? He's doing the privately funded rape gang inquiry, which there'll be hearings forthcoming in the next year, and there'll be people giving evidence of that who have actually got some credibility on the issue. He's brought together, again, my friends, Harrison Pitt, Charlie Downs, Lewis Brackpool, under the umbrella of Restore Britain, to actually harness their independent journalistic work and their integrity. Rupert is happy to cultivate young talent. Frankly, Rupert is the man. So, okay, what's Rupert's mechanism into Parliament? And we'll finish up in sort of 10 minutes. I'll do the super chat. Well, Nigel Farage, according to the Financial Times, is poised to make a deal with the Conservative Party. And even though they've been denying it all week, look, I've been in Westminster. The chatter is true. This is something that the Tories and Reform members are both talking about. They're keeping it in their back pocket. There are people in Reform that are going, well, we want to do a deal with the Tories. They're total traitors, right? But the donors want them to. The donors want them to. Farage is open to the idea. It's probably going to happen if the Tories don't continue to implode, right? If Jenrick takes over the Tories, and look, I know some people on Jenrick's team, they're nice people, they're on side, but Jenrick, I'm sorry, there's something mimetic about the fact that he welcomed the Afghans in, and now the Afghans are doing all the terror attacks and the sex attacks. The attempts to, like, T1000 the Tory party back together, as Parvini would say, it can't morph into the shape of Jenrick, because even he is contaminated by the Boris wave and the Tories' last record. So, if Reform do a deal with the Tories, they will become the Tory party. If they keep taking Tory defectors, they will become the Tory party. As it stands, Reform aren't going to be capable of fixing problems despite having some good people in there. You know, like James Orr, for example. So, okay, what would be the smartest move? How do you stop the Tory-Reform merger? How do you get Rupert Lowe in position to be a viable alternative? Or at least spend his final parliamentary term, because he's 68, you know, he may not want to run again. How do you spend it nipping at the heels of Reform to make sure that they shift and occupy the vacant right-wing space in the Overton window rather than succumbing to pressure from their left flank, from every party, every media outlet, every donor, every lord, every opinion they're presented with in their increasingly isolated bubble of what is acceptable in politics. How do you prevent that? Have Rupert Lowe take over the Tories? That might work. Day one, of course, I'm saying this all with the proviso that one, he brings the old logo back, like metaphorically burning down David Cameron's tree by bringing the old torch back. And two, on day one, making a public show. I would actually just convene a press conference and not tell them ahead of time, but making a public show of banishing pretty much every MP from the party, pretty much every peer who has ruined the party. Like, you've got to permanently banish Boris Johnson, Priti Patel, Michael Gove, David Cameron. Like, just strip them of their memberships. Ban them from the Carlton Club. Make sure they can't come to party conference. Make sure they have absolutely no say over selection mechanisms. Make sure that the MPs in Parliament that won't vote alongside you are encouraged to defect to the Lib Dems. And you know what? A couple of years of the Lib Dems being the official opposition to the Labour government is going to make everyone sick to the back teeth of that kind of politics, especially as the country keeps getting worse and everyone is ignoring them except for Rupert Lowe. It could work. And people are saying not just membership, but knighthoods too. I mean, I don't know if he'd have the ability to strip peerages and knighthoods, but again, were I king, I would absolutely strip knighthoods from not just Sadiq Khan and Keir Starmer and Tony Blair, but yeah, Michael Gove, James Cleverly. Why the fuck did James Cleverly get a knighthood? Seriously, like, he was a failure of a Home Secretary. He's the most... James Cleverly's constituency is Braintree. Cleverly from Braintree. Could you get anything more inadequate? James Cleverly is also, you know... When I was going to say something, but I can't say it. But the most defining moment of James Cleverly for me was when, after Kimmy Badenoch won the election, he tweeted that Labour was looking pale, male and stale. So, despite being half white himself, demonstrating complete and seething contempt, which he then excuses irony, but I would never make that joke, for the native population. That man shouldn't just not be the deputy leader of the Conservative Party. He shouldn't just not have a peerage. He shouldn't be in Parliament. That man, if he hates us so much, he should move abroad. He should move away from white people if he doesn't like white people very much. Because he's already demonstrated it, and I would never say the same about black people. Because I know plenty of nice black people. So I wouldn't say that being black is inherently evil or worse. And so why did he insinuate that against white people? You're not fit to represent us, James. You're appalling. So anyway, could Rupert take over the Tories? Well, the only problem he's got is this. And this is the list of Tory MPs. So I thought I'd do this quick exercise before I read your super chats. And again, get the super chats in if you want me to answer questions and things like that, if you're still hanging around. Spot the interesting and useful Conservative. I mean, Peter Bedford signed a few of Rupert's motions, so he might be okay. Yeah. Chris Chope, I think he's keeping Rupert's, motion on quantitative easing and banning money printing alive. So Chris Chope was sound as well during lockdowns. Anyone else? Claire Coutinho's been fine on net zero and Islam, but not particularly remarkable. Caroline Dyage is still an MP. She needs to be stripped of her honours immediately. Anyone else? No. Mark Francois was the one who responded to David Amos's murder by saying we need David's law censoring social media and banning online anonymity. Louis French is nice, actually. He's quite a good guy. So Louis French has been signing Rupert's motions about deportations and tool theft. So Louis French, okay, so it's what, like 2 MPs maybe that you're going to keep. Nusrat Ghani, go, obviously. Anyone else? Nope. Certainly not Jeremy Hunt. Jeremy Hunt's not even an MP anymore, is he? Didn't think so. Yep, nope, none of them here. Literally, what you're seeing is basically a bunch of diversity hires, total reprobates if the rumours about candidate selection being controlled by Dougie Smith, who ran sex parties in stately homes, are to be believed, and lightweights. None of these people are very good. Robbie Moore, actually, I like Robbie Moore. Robbie Moore's been very good on the grooming gang, so that's 3. Caroline Oakes, definitely not. Ben Obezi Jetty, he is obsessed with race politics, and all he does is spend his time on Twitter calling everyone racist. Like, Ben, you're a race communist. Like, again, if you don't like white people very much, leave the country. Please, you will be happier somewhere else where you don't constantly have to sit on Twitter complaining about racism. Priti Patel, she should be interned in the Tower of London for the demographic treachery she's wreaked on this country. Chris Philp, wholly inadequate. I mean, Chris Philp chases trends. Jet Rankin's good. Okay, so what's that? 4. Andrew Rosendale's alright. Okay, 5. Are we going to get to the end of the list and be Nick Timothy? Okay, 6. Wow. Okay, 6. We'll also include Suella and Katie Lamb. So maybe 8 MPs total. Rupert is going to have to start from the ground up. And that's fine. That's if they allow him to take it over. Because you know what's happening. They're going to line up James Cleverly to take over because he came in third place last time. Now, I don't think James Cleverly is going to get it for a few reasons, but we'll see. And if they made James Cleverly the leader of the Conservative Party after Kemi Badenoch, then they just deserve to die. Right? And I've got no emotional attachment to the Conservative Party. Remember, guys, they kicked me out. They kicked me out for saying some very sensible things. If they made Robert Jenrick, again, look, the people around Jenrick are nice enough. Jenrick's got this little cadre of MPs that are very loyal to him, like Neil O'Brien and Nick Timothy and Katie Lamb and Robbie Moore, and there's a few others. And he probably has the numbers to depose Badenoch, but I don't think he beats Farage. And I think that his record is an anchor tied around his leg. I don't think Rupert needs to banish him from the party, but because he's been quite good on as Shadow Justice Minister, but he's certainly not a leader. So the only person the Tories should be turning to in their desperation is someone who has credibility on the major issue that everyone cares about, that the Tories made the mess that reform exists to clean up, but are not going to clean up in the right way, and that's immigration. So they need to appoint an outsider. Much like a company on the brink of liquidation, they need to bring in an emergency CEO to save the pensions and save the building from going bust, but to fire everyone who is responsible for bringing the company to the brink in the first place. And I think that needs to be Rupert. And again, I'm saying this not from any position of personal gain. I'm saying this just because this seems to be the political lay of the land, and then it stops the Tory reform merger as well. Or, if it gets significant in size, it means that Patriots have a beachhead in a potential reform government as the minority shareholder, a bit like the Lib Dems were in the Conservative Party, and they can force certain issues. So we can be the the policy nexus from which reform draws if it gets lazy. So I think this is a workable plan. And again, I'm not sure how it plays out, but I think at least at this point, just sort of putting it out there as an idea, all of us sort of saying, actually, this does sound like a good idea. It seems like the most plausible thing for the Tories, who have, if nothing else, craven survival instincts, to do. I think this is the sort of the first stage, right? You know, admitting you have a problem is the first step to solving it. Well, the problem the Tory parties have is that in an age of rising nativism and immigration skepticism, they elected a Yoruba Nigerian to be their leader, who campaigned for more immigration. And so they just need to, unfortunately, get rid of her, banish her to the backbenchers, and have Rupert be the leader instead. And then it will be very interesting to watch what happens next. Anyway, let's look at your super chats, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your patience. I did a lot of rambling there. I wasn't expecting it to actually go on as long as it did, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you can relay to me what you think of my harebrained strategy in the comments. I think you all agree, anyway, with my position. And again, while I'm loading up the super chats, I just want to be reassuring, because I have lots of people who watch my content who are involved in politics, who themselves are not white or not ethnically British, and I like those people. They're very nice people. I've met plenty of them, and so that is not me being vindictive to them. It's just as with the Japanese in Japan, or the Jews in Israel, or the Pakistanis in Pakistan, or any other country that should have some self-respect. I expect the English to be running England. I expect the Scottish to be running Scotland. I expect the Welsh to be running Wales, and then I'll leave the Irish to fight it out. Anyway, so super chat. Manta Shrimp for £10. Thank you, sir. I'd like to ask what your expectation is of the future of Britain. What's your expectation on the future of Britain? Well, first of all, I want to improve its schooling so that we get better spelling and grammar. Sorry, I am going to be ribbing people that do super chats, because I'm going to be doing it in love, and I hope you enjoy it. Will it survive, or will it become a colony of halal beards? As time goes, unfortunately, I see the signs of ultimate defeat. Never black pill. Things have been worse than this. All it requires is sufficient courage to fix the problem. And I do think that reform will do, if left unchecked at the moment, I think reform will do a little bit to make inroads, but they won't address the real issue, and we'll probably end up with Zia Yusuf as Prime Minister, whether or not we vote for him. I think it's going to be a terrible idea. I do think, though, that all things are possible and on the table. Think about the progress we've made in just 1 year. Like, I was on stage at Reform's Fringe event, lest it not be forgot, saying that they need to commit to mass deportations or there's no point in their party, and I got an applause from their membership, and I wasn't invited back to their conference. I've actually been banned from their event. But now, after they kicked Rupert out when Farage said that mass deportations are a dark and dangerous use of rhetoric in March, Farage then catches up and says, we need mass deportations, in the pages of the Times in, I think, July or August. So, we've already moved on with mass deportations. We've already got them adopting the Boris wave. I think Shabana Mahmood even used the phrase Boris wave, and that came from, it wasn't Drukpur or Max Tempers, but they popularised it. It was another anonymous account that's gone dark recently. But the fact that, like, terms and ideas that originate from the online right on X have now made their way to popular discourse shows there is a pipeline there, shows that we are creative and thinking seriously about these things, when usually politicians have their heads up one another's arse or firmly in the Westminster bubble and are huffing so many farts that they haven't come up for air, and so need to steal their ideas from somewhere, and eventually they'll steal it from us. So never black pill. We are winning it back, I promise you. Right? I'm here to provide you... Optimism is not a Christian virtue. Right? Hope is. And it's far from me to be optimistic, because I'm a cynical, grumpy guy. It's one of the reasons my wife loves me. She's a ray of sunshine, and I am a thundercloud. However, this is, again, I'm not coping, I'm not spinning, this is just what I think. Like, we can just do it. We can just do it. Just through sheer force of will. I wouldn't be on streams forcing this issue to an audience if I didn't think that this was possible. Right? I just keep pressing the advantage. Where on earth? Sorry, YouTube's reset it. SG for... Oh, this was about mass. Okay, thank you for that. Jack Hamilton. You share a name with a friend of mine. 999. This scenario is from a film. A dying race of aliens with advanced technology come to your country and request a patch of land and the right to bead with human women. If you were PM, what would you do? Obviously deny it. I'm not sure what that's meant to be, like a sort of cheeky analogy for. I'm genuinely probably too autistic to understand the implications of this. But if you're talking about aliens coming to Earth and mating with human women, yeah, no. Again, I'm probably being autistic from this analogy. Sorry that it didn't land, buddy. Maybe try writing in clearer terms next time. Lyle Crawford for $10. 10 Canadian dollars. What's that? 2 coins and a bottle cap? How is immigration from foreign countries supposed to ameliorate Westerners' low birth rates? In fact, it's only accelerating our demise. Well, I actually think that part of the cultural pressure is that it's driving down birth rates, because if you look outside and the world on your doorstep is a dizzying revolving door of demographic change and your culture is unrecognizable, then how are you going to feel certain enough about bringing children into a world like that? I mean, if you're also forced to move away from your family to pursue job opportunities, as Ben Shapiro advises, because you're competing with the entire world as a labor pool for housing and income in your own country, then you aren't going to be able to have children around your extended family. You're going to have them in precarious rented accommodation. And so all of these factors are going to, especially if in the Western mind that rationally plans things and plans children alongside economic security, whereas in other areas of the world they don't make that same calculation, they don't think that way, then it's going to disincentivize children as a rational choice. And so immigration is a cultural and economic disincentive to have children, while at the same time promising to subsidize the falling birth rate. It's a Ponzi scheme, right? It's about manufacturing consent for mass replacement. I don't want any of it. And you know what? Even if it was economically beneficial, I still wouldn't want it, because your home is not an economic zone. It's not a sports team. It's not a job center. It's a home full of family members, and you don't get to replace family members at the dinner table, even if you argue over dinner. Randy Noms, for $10 US, there needs to be a real response to the attack on girls. If you want women to feel safe to have more kids, they need to see men. Agree. Yeah, but I don't know what you mean by real response. I mean, I'm not saying this is what you say, but there are people that go, oh, and what are you doing about it? You're just talking about it. It's like, yeah, and if I wasn't talking about it, you wouldn't fucking know about it, actually, because a lot of people just don't do the reading and they don't do the work, and this is why people listen to me. Like, I'm not entitled to an audience, and I'm very grateful that people think I'm worth listening to, saying completely banal things that were obvious to our grandparents and great-grandparents, a few decades ago. But great idea, right? If we all just stopped doing podcasts, if we all just stopped writing about things, and if we all just stopped pissing off the establishment and making them go into crisis meetings about FNATs and Groypers and whatever else they want to label us, because we're gaining momentum and changing political discourse, if you don't want me to keep talking about these things and freaking out literally MPs and pressure groups trying to get me banned from the airwaves, and well-funded race communist activists like Sundar Katwala, if you don't want me to keep speaking and freaking those out and having an outsized impact on politics, great idea. What should I be doing instead? Oh, picking up arms and going and fighting in the streets and getting myself fucking arrested and doing literally nothing? Great, thank you. Thank you, 77th Brigade. Thank you, MI5. Thank you, Home Office Plant, for trying to encourage me to give the government an excuse to lock me up and silence me and demoralize a bunch of people. Yeah, great. No, brilliant. Anyway, I'm not saying that this is you, but the idea that it's just oh, you're just complaining on the internet. No, actually, and a lot more has been done by engaging in this than if we hadn't done it. The alternative is always compared to what? I go out and get myself arrested by doing something stupid, which the government wants me to do, or I don't talk about it at all. Or the third option is I keep doing what I'm currently doing, which seems to be working. So yeah, I'm going to go with that. But as far as if you want women to feel safe, have more kids, and they need to see men, yeah, put yourself together well, be in good shape, read old books, stand on principle, go back to church, be a pillar of your community, and also don't get frustrated when women say some harmless, frivolous nonsense. This was the most interesting part about the Nick Tucker interview, was that Nick saw women as a source of frustration and distraction from work, when Tucker was embracing the ambiguous complementarity, as Ivan Illich would say, of the fact that women can be more emotional, they can worry a lot more, and you just need to go, no, you're worrying too much, don't worry about it. You just need to be a check on their emotional excess. And when you do check that, they add wonderful things to your life. Look, I've dated some absolutely crazy women, so I'm not being immune to this. As I've said before on Lotus Ears, that many people probably didn't watch because it's behind a paywall, I had an ex-girlfriend sue me for my own belongings. And she wasn't even the worst one. Okay, so I have been through the horror stories, and I'm not blind to the dating horrors. I didn't ever have a problem really getting women. This isn't a brag. This is just my experience. So I can only like sympathize with guys who have never had a relationship, and I'm sure there's plenty of guys out there. There's plenty of guys that put that in my comments before. I've spoken to guys that have struggled with that. Seriously, man, like you have my empathy. If you're a decent man and you're put together and you actually can't find anyone that's compatible for you, unprecedented struggle throughout history. I'm very sorry for that. Don't think I'm blind to the fact that there are these problems with certain women, but there is always going to be a degree of frivolity, and women look to you to be a rock upon which their emotional waves can break, and that is actually the marker of a man. I'm not being one of these wife guys. I'm not saying, oh, my wife's way more intelligent than me, and she's actually the real leader of the household. I'm not doing that. What I'm saying is, to be the head of your household, to be the leader of a man, you need to be capable of withstanding frivolous nonsense from women and still find the charm in them. And I think that's a fair. Read Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. I know that's like boomer advice, but it's actually quite good. It's pretty good, right? Anyway, $14.99 Australian dollars. Will Tom Artyom Alexandrovich be extradited? What do I look like? Fucking Grok? Like, who? Sorry, I don't know who that is. I have my domains of expertise, my friend. I'm going to Google it just so I don't look completely ignorant. This is how you know I'm genuine, by the way, is because I'm willing to be made a fool live on air. An Israeli civil servant. A US court hearing on an Israeli civil servant. Sorry, I have no idea what's going on there. It's not my... Again, Israel's not my thing. Like, I peripherally know about it. And the few times that I have spoken about Israel or, left-wing Jews, let's just say I've gotten in major trouble behind the scenes, but I don't fucking care. I say what I think is true. Who cares? Couple of super chats that haven't had questions or anything attached to them by Bern Salini. Thank you very much, sir. Randy Noms, again, for $10 US. You might need to be clever in undoing their footholds. For example, if you can consistently force the police into a no-go zone, it might eventually stop being a no-go zone. Well, you don't need to force the police. Again, just do the Bukele model, right? Mass incarcerations, crackdowns, intolerances, and you know where the illegal migrants are being harbored. They're being harbored in multi-generational households, houses of multiple occupancy, in these ethnic enclaves. And by illegal migrants, we don't just mean the ones that crossed over on boats, we mean visa overstays, we mean tourist overstays. So you just go into these areas and just, take a door-to-door census and ask for proof of citizenship, and if they don't show it, then immediately on a plane, and also, denaturalize and deport. Harry asks, we need an Aaron Yeager. Again, I'm going to have to Google this person in politics. Just presume that I am an ignorant English Zoomer person from Attack on Titan. I'm sorry to break your hearts, ladies and gentlemen. Anime is not my thing. I've read Junji Ito, I've read some Berserk, I found it to be a bit too egregious. Junji Ito is pretty good. I don't own any of it, but like if I was going to buy a manga, I would buy some Junji Ito collections. I think I have a sneaking suspicion my wife might have brought me some for Christmas. So if she's listening to this, I haven't guessed and I haven't looked at the Amazon order, dear, but I do have a guess. But yeah, look, I don't watch any manga, I'm afraid. I watched like one episode of Attack on Titan and I hated the shrieking and the like overemphasized emotions. I just found it irritating. So sorry to disappoint. You're gonna have to go elsewhere for that. Neglectful Sausage for $10. Why did you make me read out that name? In America as in Europe, it's wrong if a BAME majority neighborhood isn't represented by themselves. In white majority countries, it's wrong if the majority is represented. It's a one-way street. Yeah. What if the roles were reversed will be emblazoned on our headstone, I suppose. It's not about hypocrisy, it's about power, right? So just pointing this out is not going to get them to change their position. Instead, you just say, I'm not putting up with the double standards, so I'm just going to advocate for my own, thank you very much. You don't just go, so, you need to abide by the standards of colorblind liberalism, because they're never going to. And then he sent another super chat for $5. Yeah, I'm not going to read that one out, because that's basically a schizo post. Sorry, man. Sorry it happened, or glad it happened. Not going to read that. Salem Saxon, $1.99. How do you suggest we reform our universities? Stop charging you so much in student loan repayments so that you can afford to super chat more, I guess. Sorry, that was really bitchy. No, serious question. Okay, how do we reform our universities? Okay, you're going to need someone a bit more qualified than me to look at that. The student loan system is a system of perverse incentives because it basically guarantees the ability for universities to rack up massive unpayable debts to pay an extensive ideological bureaucracy that delivers nothing for student experience, exorbitant amounts of money, while having the government guarantee those debts. And the government counts it as GDP, which means that the university sector, despite how poisonous and insidious it is counted as a net profit for the state. So, terrible. Also, like, largely ban foreign students. Sorry, why are we training the sons and daughters of the CCP at our top universities? Why are we allowing Chinese students to go through without speaking English and not failing them, as multiple academics have said, because the university can't afford to lose the tuition fees that they pay? Like, why are we turning entire towns into temporary university accommodation and building really expensive accommodation that then the Chinese students can pay for because, you know, the CCP can subsidize their stay because they're a corrupt kleptocratic state. Meanwhile, UK students have a hard time getting into those universities, even if they've got good grades, have to work a lot harder and still don't get as good grades by the Chinese students who don't get failed, and then have to live like in slum bedsits because they can't afford the new apartments that are being built for the foreign students. Sorry, all of this is a really perverse system of incentives. Anyway, so yeah, there's going to be a deeper question. It might be something that's worth exploring later on. I should fire off a message to Dave Green about that because he'll have some ideas. And by the way, you should be listening to Dave Green's Fiddler's Green podcast because he covers a lot of different subjects in one show, and every single subject is intellectually nourishing. Dave Green, gentleman, really serious thinker. Go over and listen to his thing. And again, I don't stand to gain from that. I'm just telling you, this is nourishing, it's worth your time, and we should support each other in the space. $5 from Angel Berber. Connor, do you now have a new partnership with Tim Pool with a culture war show regarding the UK? If so, is it a weekly show with you as the host? Oh, right, yeah. So I think, if I'm correct, I didn't check this before I went live, but you might be now getting partnership episodes of my new show, yeah, it is up, of Across the Pond with myself and Tate Brown. I wish you would have let me know that that was going out tonight, because I would have changed my stream and not conflicted with the bloody algorithm. Thanks, Tate. But yeah, so you're going to get 2 episodes a week from me and Tate. You're going to get an hour on Saturday of just me and Tate discussing UK and US news and just riffing back and forth and being terminally online. And then on Sunday, you're going to get me, Tate, and a guest. We're going to try and pull from basically the like Anglo-Zoomer sphere. So any suggestions, please forward them. So far, we've had Patrick Casey, John Doyle, Charlie Downs, and this week we've got Ozpil on from Australia, talking about him being kicked out of a rally by RV Yemeni. And also the like Indian lobby in Australia and Britain. It's a really good episode. Ozpil's an interesting chap. I think we're gonna have Mary Morgan on a future episode, but we're happy to take no, not Andrew Tate. No, Tate Brown from Timcast. I'm not gonna share a show with a pimp turned imam. Sorry, I don't respect Andrew Tate at all. I would have him imprisoned for running a porn company and admitting to sexting the men using it, pretending to be the girls. Like, that's so spiritually gay. Anyway, so yeah, you're going to get Culture War episodes from me on Saturday and Sunday, which means I might have to move my stream day to Monday. Hopefully you guys don't mind that. And it means that you're just going to get more content from me throughout the week. I might do some more streams and some edited videos just because of the time it takes. We'll see how good the viewing figures are on the stream. If it's not just financially viable, but if I care most about getting the message out there, and if I get more views on videos than I do on streams, then I'll take the extra time to put the editing in. But if the streams get consistently high views, then, you know, and that's down to you guys. If you want to clip and share this stuff, up to you. Appreciate it. Rod says, hello, Connor. Oh, this was the private schoolboy one. Hello there. These are New Zealand dollars? What's the exchange rate for New Zealand? I've actually never been to New Zealand. I went to Australia for 2 days recently. Hey, welcome to the currency trading show. I mean, 1 New Zealand dollar is £0.5 sterling. Okay. So, excellent. Thank you for the £2. Make the case for me, a 19-year-old Englishman, to return to the homeland in spite of the tragic state it's in. I mean, if you're currently living in New Zealand, I don't encourage people to flee, but I don't encourage people to stay, right? Or no, not to return. I think we should do a right of return policy if and when we repair our demographics. But if you're living with New Zealand and you have a family out there in the Anglosphere and you're living in exile planning to return someday, I don't blame you for prioritizing your family and keeping them safe. It's just, I'm not encouraging anyone to leave the UK because I think fleeing would be an act of cowardice, especially when we need people to stand and fight. So, look, I can't convince you that where we are now is better than New Zealand at the moment because I don't know the conditions in New Zealand. I just know things are really bad here. But I would hope to contribute to making the country such a place that you could return and raise your family here as a patriotic Englishman again. That's my mission. So, and seriously, I spend pretty much all my time doing this. I haven't relaxed at all this week. I've been a bit ill, to be honest with you, which is why the sound's slightly under the weather, or anyway. And so I've just thrown myself entirely into the mission, doing things behind the scenes that, you know, aren't always on camera. It's why I don't post on as much on Twitter as other people, because I don't just sit there on my phone all day. Like, I'm actually reading and writing and doing my own research. Most people don't even write their own Substack. Like, they're fucking frauds, okay? Lots of people do, though, so support the people's work that actually do stuff. Evan S. for $9.99. In Fiffle Day and Raging Night, with strong hearts full our souls ignite. When all seems lost in the war of light, look to Christ for hope burns bright. Look, I appreciate Christianity and Green Lantern as much as the next man. I've actually got like a custom Green Lantern omnibus set. Anyway, Green Lantern's one of my top characters. I'll buy basically everything Green Lantern, except for that weird black girl thing from Far Sector. Who cares? But I don't know. There's something Reddit about melding about melding Christianity and comic books. Except for when, like, Hal Jordan's actually a Catholic. They retroactively changed him to be Jewish recently for no reason. Which I just, like, why? They're erasing Christian identity across DC. It's really frustrating. Probably because demons are in charge. Neglectful Sausage, thanks for making me read your name again. Brilliant. Fantastic. In America, when whites move in and force black people to leave, it's called gentrification because it destroys economic and housing opportunity for the natives. Yes. Wow. Thank you. Are you just copying like Jared Taylor lines into my chat? I mean, yeah. Very insightful. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Henry Clay for $4.99. This might be the last one, because blimey, it's nearly 11 o'clock here. Have you seen the interview between Crowder and Fuentes? If so, thoughts? I have seen it. I thought Crowder was very fair. So I used to watch a lot of Crowder, and then after the whole divorce thing, I just sort of... So Stefan Molyneux has this term, and it's really useful, right? It's called Trash Planet. So, have you ever seen people behaving in a certain way that you just immediately find radioactive? And you don't know why. It's because it's a distress signal from Trash Planet, right? It's like a crab from the top of the bucket waving his claw asking to be rescued, but as soon as you grab hold of the claw to help one crab, you get dragged into the bucket. As soon as you land on Trash Planet, it's like the ship from Alien. Do not go in the ship, do not investigate the egg, do not get face fucked by a face hugger because your entire crew will die. You will bring it back with you. It's like the it's bog of stench from Labyrinth, right? If you touch it, you'll never wash the smell off. And so the whole thing around Candice and her leaking the Ring doorbell footage of Stephen arguing with his wife to some leftist journo, and Stephen having a public divorce battle, and all of that just put me off, right? I just saw it as like Trash Planet. I don't know any of these people, and even though I'm never going to know these people probably, I'm not insulting any of them, even though I think Candice is mental. I just feel like if I even watch it, I'm touching the bog of stench. I'm reacting to the distress call from Trash Planet, and I just don't need drama in my life, right? I hate interpersonal stuff. That's why I'm introverted. I hate when politics is about personalities rather than issues. It's why I hated the Rupert Lowe stuff. It's why the Spectator thing was kind of stressful, actually, because it's like, oh, I'm just surrounded by awful people. I'm on Trash Planet. I didn't even realize I'd landed here. Same with all the bitchy backroom stuff that I alluded to earlier. I just hate people just going behind your back. I hate the schoolgirl nature of politics. But I have seen some Crowder stuff more recently. I'm glad he's brought back Changed My Mind. The chatting to the black guys in the barbershop thing was funny. And I think Crowder is ultimately a good faith actor. So I don't want to insult Crowder at all. And Crowder, much like Milo and even Ben Shapiro, was instrumental in bringing me around to politics. And, you know, we all move on eventually, but we start a lot with SJW cringe compilations. And the only person that's actually kind of like retained my interest throughout that whole time and my respect is Carl. A lot of you guys, some of you probably would have run into Carl at Lotus Eaters live events. They need to do one again soon. It was where I first met Carl properly, was the 2021 Lotus Eaters live event. I still got the Polaroid somewhere of me sat at a table with a bunch of the attendees. It's good times. Carl has always been a genuine gentleman, and you'll know that if you've met him. Anyway, so have I seen the Crowder and Fuentes interview? I have, and I think Fuentes' strength, again, even if you don't like him, I have to like preface this with everything. This is something that Fuentes' opponents don't respect, is his strength as a broadcaster. He's funny. He's very funny, right? And his outrageousness doesn't shock any of us who grew up playing Call of Duty and being in MW2 lobbies and calling each other all sorts of swears and slurs. It washes over us. And I can also, because I listen to a lot of people in the space that I disagree with, I can listen to Nick and disagree with him on certain issues while also finding him entertaining, right? And so, clutching your pearls and saying, oh, how dare you listen to him because he's offensive. It's like, actually, it's kind of funny. And at this point, you kind of need to check in on his show to get a read of what a certain sphere of your own side are thinking. And he's got a very, very comprehensive knowledge of geopolitics. Like, again, he makes some wrong calls, but he's clearly well read. Just like Shapiro is well read, but he just gets the wrong conclusions on things like Trump. So I think that Fuentes actually wasn't in his element during that interview with Crowder, and there wasn't enough of his humor shining through to make it a particularly noteworthy interview. I think the Piers Morgan thing is going to be pure slop, and Piers Morgan's going to look like a clown. So that'll be the more interesting one to watch. Anyway, I think that's all the super chats for tonight, and thank you all for your generosity, and I hope that I answered all of your questions. Oh, actually, no, there were 2 more. Okay, right, well, I'm not going to leave them unanswered, am I? £5 from SG. You seem to have put a lot of thought into planning into being a future dad. Do you have any advice for fathers? Oh, blimey. I don't think I'm qualified to give advice, I'm afraid. Because no plan survives first contact with reality. What's the Mike Tyson quote? Everyone's got a plan before they get punched in the face. And I'm just hoping I do as well of a job as my own father and my grandfathers did, because I wouldn't want to dishonor them, and I wouldn't want to dishonor my own sons. And I think if you keep that in mind, if the inverse, if you didn't have a good dad, I don't know your personal situation, it'd be weird if I did. If you didn't have a good dad, identify all the areas in which your childhood fell short and give your child all the things that you didn't have. I think that's what my wife plans to do in certain elements as well. So, yeah, that's my only advice. Perhaps ask Harry from Lotus, because he's beaten me to being a dad by a few years. And yeah, I'm still in touch with Lotus, guys. By the way, I know people keep asking, and yeah, I spoke to them the other day. So, Harry. Well, not just Harry from Lotus. Harry sent in what seems to be the last super chat for $4.99. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on England, My England by Orwell from The Lion and the Unicorn. Oh, we need to revise it, actually. Because... So, if I'm remembering correctly, that passage describes England as a set of aesthetics and feelings about food and post boxes, and this is a section in Lion and the Unicorn that I was reading actually a little while ago, because I'm doing a long essay on civic versus ethnic versus whatever else nationalism, and this is the bit that Shabana Mahmood seems to be alluding to when she said her patriotism is that of Orwell. I mean, I thought she meant it's 1984, where she demands that 2 + 2 = 5, and therefore by that standard we have to recognise her as English. But so, my friend Charlie Downs put out a post the other day that says that just conserving the demographics of England isn't enough, and I agree with them. You need a Christian revival, and you need a program of public education to remind us of who our historical heroes are. And you need to reignite the intuition that each person has for the aesthetics and the habits and the creature comforts of their homeland. But do I resonate with what Orwell was basically saying about having a sentimental attachment to the small things that characterize English life, like a roaring fire next to a pub lunch, or the main thing that I love is walking around my neighborhood in spring or autumn and hearing the robins singing about 4 o'clock. unbeatable, right? It's beautiful. It's almost like the sort of robins on the snowy post boxes on Christmas cards. That sort of thing doesn't transfer across cultures, and that is so ingrained as an instinct into your DNA that it is indistinguishable from your ethnicity. You know, it's an affinity for those cultural artifacts are as English as your heritage. So I get what Orwell's getting at there, but it can't be boiled down to if you admire the bulldog on the biscuit tin or you wave the Union Jack during the Jubilee that you're British. Like, you can't decouple those aesthetics from the ethnicity for whom they are most intuitive. It's a bit like the Constitution, right? As Oron McIntyre talks about so eloquently. Actually, I was just on Oron's show, so I'll drop that link in the chat as well. You should go and watch that. It's very good fun. But the Constitution reflects the way that people are constituted, and so they are intuitive to a certain people. And so if you try to apply the Constitution to a people with whom it was not written in the mind of, then it means absolutely nothing. So yeah. So you can't decouple values or aesthetics or sentiments or anything from the people to whom they are second nature. Right, I will love you and leave you, ladies and gentlemen, but I will also just drop the link to my appearance on Oron McIntyre's show in the chat, because it was a good discussion that I had with Oron about the interview with Tucker Carlson and Piers Morgan. I do random appearances. Someone's saying, look, it's in Connor's beard. I could guess it's his haplotypic admixture. I don't actually have ginger in my beard. It's blonde. I don't have it's the lighting color. I do have quite a bit of grey though. Again, you probably can't see it in the lighting color, but there's this big patch of grey that materialized sometime around 2023 when I was dating right-wing e-girls. Anyway, thanks very much for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed the stream. I will be back next week on Monday with a very long video on the history of Hope Not Hate, and the case why the American State Department should probably step in and save us from the government that seems to be embedded with them. Because we finally found out how Harry Schuckman got that fake passport. It's going to be fun to go through. Until then, take care, God bless, enjoy your Sunday, go to Mass, hug your family, call your grandparents, tell your wife or husband you love them. Take care, sleep well, and goodbye.